Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice podcast channel. Tonight we step into Manhattan during the Great Blizzard of 1888, when snow climbs the windows like a patient white animal, and the proudest city in America suddenly feels very small. What happens when the streets vanish? When the trains freeze in place? When the lamps glow through a moving wall of ice crystals? You are not watching it safely from a photograph. You're inside it, hearing the glass tremble, smelling coal smoke in the room, feeling the blanket tucked tight beneath your chin. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are listening from, and what your local time is right now, because somewhere, someone else is drifting with you. The city is still awake, but only barely. The snow has begun its slow occupation. Now, dim the lights and let yourself be carried into a room high above a Manhattan street, where the night presses softly against the panes. You are lying beneath a heavy wool blanket, listening to the strange hush gathering outside. The room is narrow, rented, and respectable enough, which is a polite Victorian miracle. A small iron bed stands near the wall, its frame chilly against the fingertip. Beside it, a washstand holds a chipped basin, a folded towel, and water already turning cruelly cold. The air smells of coal smoke, damp wool, lamp oil, and old plaster. It is not an unpleasant smell, Zack. It is the smell of a city trying to keep warm with whatever it has. Outside the window, Manhattan has not yet surrendered, but it is considering the matter. Snow strikes the glass in soft grains, then in thicker handfuls, then in sheets. You hear it tapping, sliding, whispering, and gathering along shore. It's the sill. Every gust throws another white veil across the faint glow of the street lamps below. Those lamps seem farther away than they did an hour ago. Gaslight spreads through the storm in blurred yellow circles, like tired eyes refusing sleep. Somewhere beneath you, wheels clatter over stone, then pause, then struggle forward again. A horse snorts in protest, and honestly, you cannot blame the poor creature. The driver calls out, his voice muffled by the weather and swallowed by the street. Manhattan in March is supposed to be difficult. Yes, but still businesslike. It likes inconvenience when inconvenience arrives wearing a proper schedule. This storm, however, has no manners at all. The Great Blizzard of 1888 began after a spell of rain, when temperatures dropped sharply. That sudden freeze helped coat the city in ice beneath the falling snow. You do not know yet that people will remember this storm for generations. You only know the room is colder than it should be. You pull the blanket higher, pressing your feet towards the warmer hollow near the mattress center. The ticking clock on the mantel sounds too loud in the dark. Each tick seems to ask whether the window will hold. The wallpaper near the bed shows tiny flowers, faded by years of stove heat and winter damp. Their pink petals look almost embarrassed to be here. On the chair near the door, your coat hangs stiffly, its hem still wet from evening errands. Your boots sit below it, dark leather shining with melted snow. A little puddle has formed beneath them on the bare floorboards. You consider rising to move them, then decide civilization can survive one puddle. The city has asked enough of you today. You had walked home while the snow was still only dramatic, not yet historic. At first, people treated it like nuri. Men tilted hats against the flakes and pretended weather respected ambition. Women gathered skirts above the slush with practiced patience. Newsboys shouted through the storm, their voices cracking in the cold air. Shop windows glowed with oranges, ribbons, gloves, watches, and improbable optimism. Then the wind strengthened, and the street changed its mind. Snow drove sideways, needling cheeks and filling collars. Horse cars slowed along their tracks, wheels grinding against ice and packed slush. The elevated railway thundered overhead, iron pillars shivering beneath trains wrapped in steam. That railway seemed powerful in ordinary weather, raised above mud, carts, crowds, and confusion. Yet even iron has its bedtime story, and this one is about humility. Now, from your bed, the elevated line sounds uncertain in the distance. A far metallic shriek rises, fades, and disappears into the storm. Perhaps a train has stopped between stations, lamps glowing inside like trapped fireflies. Perhaps passengers sit shoulder to shoulder, pretending not to be worried. Perhaps one gentleman is explaining loudly that he has seen worse. There is always one. You turn your face towards the window and watch snow paste itself against the glass. At first it clings only at the corners, delicate as lace. Then it thickens into ridges, crawling upward from the sill. The wind packs it fierce grain by grain, as though building a second wall. The room grows dimmer each time a gust strikes. You realize that the window is not merely being covered, it is being buried. A faint thrill moves through you, not quite fear, not quite wonder. The modern city outside has become an old mountain village in a matter of hours. Brick buildings, telegraph wires, iron rails, proud offices, and newspaper presses all stand beneath snow. Manhattan has many opinions about itself. Tonight the weather offers an edit. You hear someone moving in the room above. Slow steps crossing floorboards. A bed creaks, then a muffled cough follows. The building is awake in pieces, each tenant listening privately to the same storm. Behind another wall, a baby fusses, and a woman murmurs low comfort. Somewhere below, a stove door opens with a small metal gasp. Coal is fed to flame, and the smell deepens through the house. Heat travels unevenly in these buildings, favouring the fortunate and teasing the rest. Your own grate holds a modest glow, red at the centre, grey at the edges. It gives off enough warmth to preserve hope, which is very generous of it. You study the coals until they shift and settle with a papery sigh. Ash flakes fall inward, fragile as old snow. The room brightens briefly, then returns to shadow. Victorian Manhattan is crowded with people sleeping in every arrangement imaginable. There are brownstone bedrooms with velvet curtains and boarding house rooms barely wider than a bed. There are servants on the narrow cots, immigrants in packed tenements, bachelors in furnished rooms, and hotel guests under monogrammed linen. Tonight all of them listen to the same wind. The storm does not make them equal. Not really. Coal, food, space, and strong walls still matter very much. Yet the weather leans on every window with the same calm insistence. You imagine wealthy parlours uptown where servants bank fires and close thick draperies. You imagine tenement rooms downtown where families huddle together for warmth. You imagine the grand hotels, their lobbies glowing under chandeliers while guests pretend the storm is entertainment. Historians still argue whether the blizzard truly united the city or simply revealed its divisions. Both possibilities feel true from beneath your blanket. The snow outside is beautiful, and beauty can be terribly unfair. A gust strikes the building, so do the window rattles in its sash. You hold still. The glass hums, then quiets. A loose shutter somewhere bangs once, twice, then finds a miserable rhythm. The sound is sharp, wooden, and lonely. You count the bangs without meaning to 5, 6, 7, then the wind changes and the shutter falls silent. The sudden quiet feels larger than the noise. You breathe slowly and notice the cold air entering near the floor. It slides under the door like invisible water. Your toes curl inside wool stockings. The blanket scratches your chin, but you are grateful for every coarse thread. A candle stands unlit on the bedside table, kept for emergencies. Matches wait beside it in a small box, dry for now. The lamp across the room burns low, its flame making the chimney glass glow amber. If the gas pressure fails or the lamp goes out, darkness will arrive quickly. You wonder how many windows across Manhattan hold the same small islands of light. Each one shelters a person making private bargains with the weather. Let the roof hold. Let the fire last. Let morning come politely. The storm answers by pressing more snow to the pane. There is a soft scrape outside, like fingernails on glass. You know it is only ice or a twig, but the mind enjoys unnecessary theatre. Sleep should be approaching now, yet the city keeps offering sounds. Hooves stumble below, followed by a curse softened into something almost musical. A cartwheel spins uselessly, scraping against buried stone. Then men laugh. Not because anything is funny, but because laughing warms the chest. The laughter vanishes almost immediately. The wind takes it, folds it, and lays it somewhere under the snow. Manhattan is famous for refusing silence. Primos. Even late at night, it usually mutters, bargains, whistles, argues, rolls, rings, and clatters. Now the snow absorbs its confidence. The streets below become padded corridors. The rooftops blur into pale shapes. Cornices gather white ledges that will look elegant until they fall on someone's hat. This is the city as a sleeper might imagine it. Softened, slowed, and deeply inconvenient. A small draught reaches your cheek, carrying the clean, mineral scent of snow. It mixes with the stale warmth of the room. You remember stepping inside earlier, shaking flakes from your shoulders onto the hallway mat. The hallways smelled of cabbage, soap, coal dust, and damp umbrellas. Someone had left a pair of gloves near the radiator pipe. One glove pointed toward the stairs, as if planning a brave escape. The landlady had been standing near the parlour door, listening to reports from a lodger. He claimed the snow would stop by midnight because his knee no longer ached. This was apparently science. Such little forecasts travel how fast in bad weather. A barometer falls, a knee improves, a horse refuses oats, and everyone becomes an expert. There is a quirky old Surrey that some New Yorkers judge storms by how cats behave near cellar doors. Whether that helped anyone is another matter entirely. Cats, as usual, probably kept their conclusions private. Still, the city loves signs when newspapers cannot yet explain everything. Before radio voices, before glowing screens, before tidy forecast maps, weather arrives as rumour and sensation. You read it in the pressure behind your eyes. You hear it in horses stamping harder than usual. You smell it when wet stone turns metallic and sharp. You feel it when people in shops glance towards the door too often. Tonight, every sign has become one answer. Stay inside. You settle deeper, though sleep continues to hover just out of reach. The mattress is thin but familiar beneath you. It dips slightly toward the centre, holding the shape of many tired nights. Your pillow smells faintly of laundry starch and human worries. You shift your shoulders and listen to feathers compress inside the ticking. The sheets are cool where your knees have not warmed them. Above the mantel, a small framed print hangs crookedly in the lamplight. It shows a pastoral scene with a bridge, sheep, and trees behaving themselves. The picture is almost insulting. Outside, the real world has abandoned all pastoral restraint. Snow rushes past the window with a dry, endless hiss. The sound becomes steady enough to resemble breathing. You let your own breath match it, slower and slower. Inhale as the wind gathers, exhale as it loosens. For a moment, the storm feels less like an enemy than a large presence passing by. It has no personal quarrel with you. It has appointments with every roof, gutter, chimney, and doorstep in the city. You are simply on its route. Your thoughts drift toward the people still outside. Policemen in heavy coats may be standing at corners, their buttons rimmed with ice. Stable boys may be dragging blankets over restless horses. Night watchmen may be pacing factory floors, checking stoves and doors. A physician may be trying to reach a patient through streets that keep erasing themselves. A printer may be guarding tomorrow's newspaper, though tomorrow is becoming complicated. The city depends on people whose names rarely survive in polished histories. Their boots fill with slush while comfortable people discuss resilience later. That is often how civilization works, unfortunately. You turn slightly, and the bed rope beneath the mattress gives a tiny complaint. The sound is domestic and comforting. It reminds you that inside this room, small things still obey. The clock ticks. The lamp burns. The blanket warms. The washstand waits. Against the window, snow thickens into a pale mound that blocks the lower view entirely. You can no longer see the street. Only the higher gas lamp glow remains, trembling through frost and flakes. It feels as though your room is rising slowly into cloud. Manhattan below is disappearing floor by floor. You picture doorsteps filling, railings vanishing, stoops becoming smooth white ramps. By morning, people will open doors and find walls where exits should be. They will dig with shovels, boards, trays, and whatever dignity permits. Some will tunnel from house to street like polite burrowing animals. For now, the digging belongs to the future. The night is still making its deposit. Your eyelids grow heavier as warmth gathers around your body. The storm continues its patient labour outside. Every flake adds almost nothing, then everything. That is the secret of snow and possibly of history. Small things accumulate until the world looks transformed. A decision, a wire, a rail, a window, a room, a restless sleeper, all of it waits inside the weather. You hear the final carriage of the hour pass below, or perhaps only imagine it. The sound is slow, distant, and padded. Then there is only wind, ticking, and the soft pressure of snow against glass. The room feels dimmer now, more enclosed, almost like a cabin sealed in winter woods. Yet you are in Manhattan, crowded island of noise and ambition. Tonight, even ambition has pulled up a blanket. You close your eyes, and the snow keeps climbing. You wake to a sound that does not belong to sleep. It is not the familiar roll of wheels over paving stones, nor the steady footfall of early workers. It is a strained metallic cry, thin and distant, carried through layers of snow. For a moment, you lie still and let the room return around you. The blanket is heavy across your chest. Your breath warms the sheet near your face, and the air beyond the bed feels sharp. The window is no longer a window in the ordinary sense. It has become a pale square of pressed snow and grey light. No street appears beyond it. No passing hat, no carriage lamp, no friendly smear of gaslight at the corner. Only whiteness leans against the glass, as if morning has arrived wearing a mask. You sit up slowly, and the cold touches your neck. The floorboards answer your first movement with a soft creak. Somewhere in the building, a door opens, pauses, and closes again with great caution. The whole house seems to be listening. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders and step down into your boots, still stiff from yesterday's wet walk. They're cold at first, then unpleasant, then merely loyal. At the washstand, the basin water has a skin of ice near the rim. You press one finger against it and feel it break with a tiny crack. A small thing, yes. Still, it makes the morning feel official. You cross to the window and wipe the inside glass with your sleeve. The sleeve comes away damp. Behind the frost, packed snow clings halfway up the pane, ridged by the wind into small frozen waves. Above it, through the upper glass, you see the blurred shape of a building opposite. Its windows shine faintly, like eyes trying to open. A chimney exhales smoke that is immediately torn sideways. The smoke does not rise. Nothing rises properly today. The city seems pressed downward and flattened by weather and disbelief. Manhattan is famous for beginnerly extension. Clerks hurry to offices, bakers unload bread, milk wagons rattle, street sweepers curse, and newsboys make themselves impossible to ignore. This morning, those habits have been interrupted. The great city, so proud of its appetite for motion, has stopped breathing normally. You hear no easy traffic, no cheerful market racket, no confident iron music of schedules behaving. Instead, there is wind. There is the occasional shout dulled by snow. There is a hollow thump from somewhere below, perhaps a shovel striking a buried step. You pull on your coat over your nightshirt, because elegance has lost the argument. In the hallway, the air smells of coal smoke, boiled coffee, damp wool, and anxious conversation. A lodger stands near the stairs wearing a scarf over his ears and a look of deep personal injury. Another man peers through the front parlour curtain, then steps back as if the view insulted him. The landlady is already awake, of course. Women who manage boarding houses often seem born without the luxury of surprise. She carries a lamp in one hand and a poker in the other. The poker may be for the stove, or possibly for anyone speaking foolishly. Someone says the elevated trains have stopped. Someone else says they cannot stop, because they are elevated trains, which is not really logic. A third voice replies that iron rails do not care about confidence when packed with ice. You descend the stairs. The banister, cool beneath your palm. Each step smells faintly of polish, dust, and wet footprints. At the bottom, the front door has snowpack tight along the threshold. A wedge of white has forced itself under the sill. It lies there calmly, like a guest who arrived uninvited and removed Nobod's boots. Two men push at the door together. The wood groans. The door opens only a few inches before meeting resistance outside him. Cold air rushes through the gap, bright and bitter. It carries the smell of snow, horse sweat, coal smoke, and something metallic from frozen rails. You lean closer, careful not to block the men. Through the narrow opening you see a corridor carved in white. The stoop is half gone beneath a drift, and the railing wears a thick, rounded cap. Across the street, a lamppost emerges from the snow like a thin black reed. The lower part of it has vanished. A passerby appears suddenly at chest height in a trench between drifts, then disappears again behind a gust. For one ridiculous second, he looks like a man walking through a loaf of bread. Victorian dignity has limits. The city's transport system has become a puzzle left out in the weather. In 1888, Manhattan depends on horses, streetcars, ferries, elevated trains, and human legs. All of them are having a very poor morning. Horse cars run on rails set into streets, and those rails are now buried under ice and packed snow. Wheels cannot grip what cannot be found. Horses strain until steam rises from their bodies, then stand trembling with snow on their lashes. Drivers wrap scarves around their faces, shouting regiment, and make little progress. The animals lower their heads against the wind, wiser than many shareholders. The elevated railway should be better off, high above the drifts and street confusion. Yet the storm reaches upward with a long white hand. Snowpacks around switches, ice coats metal, and fierce gusts hammer the carriages. Reports will spread of trains stranded along the lines, passengers trapped for hours above the city. You imagine them seated in wooden cars, gloved hands tucked under arms. The lamps inside flicker while frost creeps along the windows. A gentleman checks his watch again and again, as if time has accepted his supervision. A woman keeps her veil close to her mouth for warmth. A boy presses his nose to the glass, delighted at first, then gradually less delighted. There is always a stage when adventure becomes inconvenience. The wind finds that stage quickly. Historians disagree about how many lives might have been saved if the city had already moved more wires and transit lines underground. Some argue the storm forced change that leaders had long delayed. Others suggest reform had already begun, and the blizzard simply made delay look absurd. From the doorway, with snow needling your face, the scholarly debate feels less abstract. Underground sounds very sensible, right? Now, a man from the house next door calls across the drift. His voice arrives in pieces, chopped by the wind. He says 3rd Avenue is blocked. Or perhaps he says the 3rd stair is blocked. Weather makes scholars of nobody. The landlady cups a hand behind her ear and frowns. He points toward the corner, then vanishes into blowing white. The door is forced shut again, and the hallway dims. People stand quietly for a moment, as if the storm has entered with them. Then the house begins producing practical questions. Is there enough coal? Has the milk come? Will the bakery open? Can anyone reach the office? Does anyone truly need to reach the office, or is this just male theatre? That last thought remains politely unspoken, though several faces suggest it. You move into the parlour, where a coal fire glows behind a small iron grate. The room is warmer than the hallway, and bodies have gathered there naturally. Heavy curtains hang over the windows, but pale light edges around them. The wallpaper shows dark green vines, curling forever without reaching spring. A table holds newspapers from yesterday, already feeling ancient. One paper lies open to ordinary matters, politics, shipping notices. advertisements for patent medicines, and theatre performances. The storm has turned such printed confidence into a relic overnight. Yesterday's world promised schedules. Today's world offers shovels. You sit near the fire and warm your hands, feeling the sting return to your fingers. The coal pops softly, releasing a dry mineral scent. A servant girl enters with coffee, walking carefully so the cups do not rattle. Her cheeks are red from the kitchen heat, and her sleeves are rolled despite the cold. The tray carries 6 cups, 2 chip saucers, and a sugar bowl guarded like a treasure. Coffee tastes different during a storm. It tastes less like pleasure and more like civilization insisting on itself. You take the cup and let the steam warm your face. Outside, another metallic shriek sounds, closer now. Someone says an elevated train may be stuck above the avenue. A young clerk in the parlour immediately announces he should go see. Nobody encourages him. This disappoints him. He explains that his employer will expect him downtown. The older lodger beside him snorts softly into his cup. The office, he says, may also be buried under God's own bed linen. This is received with improper satisfaction. The clerk blushes and looks toward the window. You understand him, though. Modern Manhattan teaches people that absence is failure. It teaches them that punctuality is morality wearing a watch chain. The storm has no respect for such lesson. Outside, bells begin ringing somewhere in the distance. They are faint and uneven, perhaps from a firehouse, perhaps from a stalled vehicle, perhaps from alarmed imagination. Sound behaves strangely in heavy snow. Some noises vanish entirely. Others travel with a ghostly clearness, detached from their sources. A shovel scraping stone may sound near enough to touch, while a shout from across the street becomes a murmur from another country. You feel the city shrinking into pockets of warmth and effort. Each building is an island. Each lit room is a small republic. Beyond the walls, streets become channels between white banks. The main stream effect is simple and astonishing. The blizzard paralyzed much of New York's transportation for days. That paralysis touched nearly every ordinary routine, from food delivery to newspaper distribution. The city did not merely slow down. It discovered that speed had been holding many pieces together. A quirky story travels through the parlour with the coffee. Someone claims a well-dressed man tried to ski down a Manhattan Avenue using barrel staves tied to his boots. Nobody knows if this is true. Everyone hopes it is. The image has obvious value in a freezing room. You picture him wobbling past shops, dignified coat flapping, face arranged in scientific determination. Then you picture him falling slowly into a drift, becoming less scientific by the second. The parlour smiles. For a few breaths, the storm becomes comic rather than commanding. Then the wind strikes the windows again. The curtains lift slightly, as if some invisible hand has pinched them. The fire trembles in the grate. A thin line of soot drops from the chimney bricks, dusting the hearth. The room grows quiet. You notice every texture nearby, the woven chair seat beneath you, the heat on your palms, the rough cup handle against your finger. Your senses narrow, then deepen. Snow has a way of making people attend to small things. The servant girl returns with the news from the kitchen door. The alley is blocked. The coalman has not come. The ash barrel is under a drift, which sounds almost peaceful until one must use it. The landlady presses her lips together. No panic appears on her face, only arithmetic. How much coal remains in the cellar? How many meals can be stretched from bread, potatoes, onions, and yesterday's beef? How long before tenants confuse concern with helpful advice? She orders the fires to be kept modest, not bling. The parlour accepts this with chilly disappointment. Outside, the city continues failing at motion. People attempt to cross streets and lose their bearings between corners. A man may walk half a block and find himself back near the same shop front. Snow covers curbs, rails, steps, cellar doors, and the small landmarks that guide the feet. A newspaper office may be only 20 minutes away in fair weather. Today it might as well be across a frontier. At the front window, someone parts the curtain. You rise and look over his shoulder. The street has become an uneven white valley. A few figures move through it slowly, bent forward against the gale. Their coats are powdered, their hats pulled low, their steps deliberate. One carries a shovel over his shoulder like a pilgrim's staff. Another pulls a small sled piled with bundles wrapped in cloths. You cannot tell whether the bundles are food, laundry, or someone's brilliant solution to being cold. A horse stands near the curb, blanketed and steaming, while two men dig around its legs. The animal blinks patiently into all the storm. There is something humbling about its endurance. Human beings build cities and then depend upon horses to forgive them. The elevated track looms above the avenue, partly hidden by blowing snow. A train sits motionless on it. Dark shapes visible inside the car. Smoke or steam drifts from somewhere near the engine, torn flat by the wind. The sight draws everyone close to the window. No one speaks at first, it just is at first. A city that moves above the street has been stopped above the street. That fact lands quietly. It is not dramatic in the way newspapers prefer. It is worse. It is believable. You imagine the passengers stamping their feet, sharing newspapers, exchanging complaints, forming brief loyalties against cold. Perhaps someone has food in a parcel. Perhaps someone tells stories too loudly. Perhaps a child has fallen asleep against a stranger's sleeve. The train has become a room in the sky, held in place by snow. Below it, the avenue has become a trench. Inside the parlour, the fire gives another soft pop. You feel warmth on one side of your face and cold radiating from the window on the other. This is Manhattan's morning balance, heat and frost sharing a wall. The city has not ended. It's only being shown its hidden dependencies. Coal, horses, rails, wires, bridges, ferries, bakers, drivers, servants, police, shovelers, mothers, clerks, and strangers. All must work, or the great machine coughs and stalls. The storm outside turns those dependencies visible. Snow does not explain itself. It simply falls until explanations become necessary. You return to your chair and cup the last warmth of your coffee. The room murmurs again, softer now. No one seems eager to leave. Even the young clerk has stopped discussing duty. He watches the fire with the grave expression of a man reconsidering capitalism. The landlady tells him that his employer will manage without him for one morning. Her tone suggests the employer should be grateful. Beyond the curtains, the stuck train remains unseen but present, like a thought the room cannot forget. The city has stopped breathing in its usual rhythm. Yet inside the pause, other rhythms begin. A kettle sings. A shovel scrapes. A horse stamps. A stranger calls through snow. You sit with your hands around an empty cup, listening as Manhattan learns stillness against its will. You return upstairs when the parlour begins to feel too crowded with questions. The stairwell is colder now, with a grey breath of winter moving between floors. Each step carries a different smell from the house. Coffee clings near the lower landing. Coal smoke rests in the middle, and damp wool waits outside every door. By the time you reach your room, your fingers ache inside your sleeves. The door sticks slightly, swollen by the weather. You shoulder it open and enter a space that feels both familiar and changed. The bed remains where it was, narrow and patient. The washstand still holds its basin, with broken ice floating at the edge like little glass scraps. The lamp smells faintly scorched, yet the window has transformed the whole room. Cano pressed against the lower pane turns the light milky, making everything seem underwater. The walls look farther away. The ceiling seems lower. You stand there quietly, aware of how a room becomes a shelter only when something outside wants in. The cold creeps through brick and plaster with remarkable politeness. It does not burst into the room. It seeps under doors, slides along baseboards, gathers near chair legs, and settles around ankles. It is a patient guest. You take the poker and stir the grate, though the coals have nearly spent themselves. A dull red glow answers from beneath ash. You add 2 small lumps of coal because the landlady's warning about economy has already become house law. The coal clicks against iron, then catches slowly. A thin blue flame lifts, trembles, and turns yellow. The heat is modest, but your hands welcome it like a royal visit. You keep them near the grate until the skin tightens and prickles. Outside, the storm presses harder against the building. The wind makes a low note in the chimney, almost like an organ tuning in the dark. From another room comes the cough of an older man, then the scrape of a chair. A woman laughs somewhere down the hall, softly and without much amusement. The house is becoming a village. Doors open more often than usual. People who normally pass with nods now share matches, news, hot water, and concern. Privacy still exists, but it has loosened its collar. You remove your coat and place it over the foot of the bed for extra warmth. Then you kneel near your trunk and search for anything useful. A second pair of stockings appears beneath folded linen. A knitted muffler, forgotten since January, emerges smelling faintly of cedar. You find a small book, a packet of letters, and one biscuit wrapped in paper. The biscuit is hard enough to serve in construction. Still, you place it on the table with respect. Weather improves the reputation of humble food. Across Manhattan, similar inventories are taking place in thousands of rooms. People count candles, coal, bread, lamp oil, blankets, and patience. Families crowd closer around stoves in tenement flats. Servants sleep near kitchen ranges to keep fires alive. Hotel guests ring bells for hot water and discover bells are not magic. In wealthier houses, heavy curtains hold back the cold better than thin boarding house glass. Yet even there, drafts slip through keyholes and under polished doors. The city is built of brick, stone, iron, glass, wood, and human expectation. The storm tests each material. It also tests the expectation. You sit on the edge of the bed and listen. There are fewer outside sounds now, as if the city has retreated behind walls. Inside, sounds become larger. A pipe knocks. A kettle lid jumps. Floorboards complain beneath unseen feet. Somebody sneezes with theatrical dare. You smile, then tuck the muffler around your neck. The wool is rough, but roughness has become a form of kindness. The mainstream fact of this storm is that indoor life became a survival system. Manhattan homes, boarding houses, hotels, and tenements were not passive shelters during the blizzard. They became improvised centers of heat, food, nursing, negotiation, and endurance. The official city slowed, but domestic labor intensified. Fires had to be kept, meals stretched, children calmed, linens dried, and sick people watched. Storm history often remembers block trains and heroic digging. Rooms remember who carried coal upstairs. You hear a knock at your door. It is tentative, more a question than an announcement. When you open it, a young woman from the next room stands holding a teapot wrapped in a towel. Her hair has been pinned quickly, with strands escaping near her temples. She asks whether you have a spare cup. Her own has cracked from hot water, which seems a dramatic betrayal by pottery. You invite her in for a moment and search the washstand shelf. The spare cup has a chip along the rim but remains fundamentally ambitious. She pours a little tea into it, and the scent rises immediately. It smells of tannin, steam, and comfort pretending not to be medicine. She says her aunt downstairs insists tea prevents chills. Then she admits her aunt also believes cold feet encourage melancholy. You both look at your boots and decide the theory deserves attention. The conversation is quiet because the room itself invites quiet. She tells you she works in a millinery shop when weather behaves. Today the shop is unreachable, and the feathers are no doubt surviving without supervision. You imagine hats in the dark shop window, plumed and tilted, abandoned to snowbound dignity. She says one customer once demanded a mourning bonnet trimmed with cheerful blue ribbon. People grieve differently, she adds. The wind rattles the pane at just the right moment, as if offering commentary. You both laugh softly. The laugh warms the room more than the coal does. She lifts the chipped cup with both hands and moves nearer the grate. Her sleeves smell faintly of starch and lavender water. The storm has brought strangers into the same small circle of heat. Not romantically, not dramatically, not in the way novels prefer. Simply practically, gently, but because the fire is here and the hallway is cold. There is a scholarly uncertainty tucked inside moments like this. Some historians suggest disasters create temporary neighbourliness across class and occupation. Others warn that such togetherness often fades quickly once normal hierarchies return. In this room, with tea steaming between you, both views feel possible. Kindness may be temporary, see? Still be real. The young woman notices the biscuit on your table. She raises one eyebrow. You explain that it is food in the legal sense. She produces from her pocket a small piece of candied ginger wrapped in paper. Apparently millinery work has hidden advantages. You divide the ginger with a penknife and share it solemnly. The sweetness is sharp and warm on your tongue. It sends a little glow down your throat, followed by the old burn of spice. Outside, snow shifts heavily against the window. For a moment, the room is only taste, heat, wool, and dim white light. The quirky tidbit comes from a story she heard at breakfast. A gentleman at a nearby hotel supposedly slept in his overcoat and hat and gloves because he feared the roof would vanish. When called for breakfast, he appeared fully dressed, but still wrapped in a blanket from chin to boot. He explained that he was prepared for evacuation and eggs. You can picture him perfectly. Victorian respectability was often just panic with buttons. The story may be embroidered, but storms are excellent. They stitch rumours into garments people enjoy wearing. After she leaves with her teapot, the room feels larger again, and a little colder. You close the door and wedge a folded newspaper along the bottom to block the draft. The paper crinkles under your fingers. Yesterday's advertisements face downward into duty. A miracle tonic now serves as insulation. This seems like its most honest work. You move the chair nearer the bed and drape the coat across both, making a barrier against the window's chill. Then you take the towel from the washstand and tuck it along the sill. The towel grows damp almost at once. Moisture creeps around the therefrom where snow presses against glass. You wipe it away, then watch it return. Some battles in domestic life are not won. They are merely attended. In larger houses, her servants are likely doing this at every window. They are rolling towels, checked shutters, carrying scuttles, fetching blankets, and warming bricks for beds. In tenements, mothers may be stuffing rags into cracks while children huddle close. A boarder in a cheap lodging house may sleep in all his clothes, with newspapers under his coat. Newspapers are surprisingly democratic in winter. They inform the mind, then warm the ribs. You lie down again, not to sleep yet, but to conserve warmth. The bed takes your weight with a tired sigh. You keep your boots on, which feels improper and deeply sensible. The blanket lies over your coat, your muffler, and your folded arms. The room smells now of coal, tea, ginger, damp towel, and old wood. The combination is oddly soothing. It tells the body that people are managing. Outside, the wind changes direction. Snow scrapes across the upper pane in bursts. The covered lower glass glows with a strange muted brightness. It's like lying beside a wall made from cloud. You imagine the snowbank touching the window from the outside, cold and dense and silent. It is not attacking. It is merely occupying space the city thought belonged to air. Your thoughts drift through the other rooms on the block. A child may be asking whether school can possibly happen. A mother may be saying no with admirable restraint. A bachelor may be discovering that one cannot dine on mustard and confidence. An elderly widow may be feeding a fire with broken crate wood save for some unknown necessity. A hotel porter may be carrying hot bricks wrapped in flannel to guests who suddenly admire him. A cook may be making soup from bones that had expected retirement. So much of history happens in kitchens and bedrooms. It happens where bodies are kept warm enough to continue. The storm outside is grand, but survival is domestic. You feel the cold at the tip of your nose. Your breath rises faintly when you exhale toward the window. The sight startles you at first, then becomes another rhythm. Breath appears, fades, appears again. The cold settles. The room creaks. Somewhere nearby, the young woman with the teapot begins humming. The tune is faint through the wall, too soft to identify. It moves slowly, with little pauses between phrases. The sound makes the storm seem farther away. You close your eyes and let the house gather around you, not as a building only, but as layers of human warmth. One room holds tea, one holds coughing, one holds worry over coal, one holds a child asleep across 2 chairs. One holds a servant counting potatoes with more seriousness than any banker counts bonds. Outside, Manhattan streets are failing at their usual business. Inside, as smaller economies continue, warmth is earned, saved, shared and measured. Sleep approaches in loose folds. The bed is still hard. The air is still cold and the window is still being claimed by the snow. Yet your body understands the instructions now. Stay low, stay covered, stay near heat and let the storm spend itself. Your hand rests beneath the blanket, warmed by your own breathing. The rough muffler brushes your jaw. The house murmurs softly through walls and pipes. You feel sheltered, not because the storm is gentle, but because people have begun answering it together. You leave the room when the smell of the hallway changes. At first it had been coal smoke, wool and ordinary morning worry. Now there is fried onion somewhere below, lamp oil near the stairs, and a sharper scent of melting ice. The house is waking into labour rather than comfort. Doors stand open by an inch or two, releasing strips of yellow light. Voices move through the corridor in low currents. No one speaks loudly, as if the storm has lowered the ceiling over every head. You step carefully toward the stairs, one hand sliding along the banister. The wood feels smooth where many palms have polished it over years. Cold air sinks from the upper landing and pulls around your ankles. Every floor seems to have its own weather. On the second landing, a servant kneels beside a brass lamp, trimming its wick with serious attention. Her scissors make a tiny metallic click. The glass chimney lies beside her on a folded cloth smudged with soot at the lip. She smells faintly of soap, ash, and kitchen heat. Her hands are red from washing, yet she works with the calm precision of a jeweller. She says the gas is uncertain in part of the house. Some lamps burn low, some sputter, some refuse the dignity of the cuporillos. So she is making sure the oil lamps are ready, because darkness has been too bold already. You watch the small flame return after she touches a match to the wick. It grows from blue to gold, then steadies behind glass. The light warms the wallpaper and makes the stair dust glow. Gaslight is one of Manhattan's evening miracles, but it depends on pipes, pressure, companies, workers, and luck. In a storm, even light reveals its contract with the city. Nothing is independent. Not a flame, not a streetcar, not a cup of tea, not a respectable breakfast egg. The servant rises with the lamp and nods for you to mind the step. A patch of melted snow has turned the landing slick. Someone carried ice indoors on board boots, and now the house has its own little street hazard. Victorian domestic life is full of such minor betrayals. You descend behind her, following the lamp's glow through the dim stairwell. The kitchen sounds grow clearer. A stove door clangs. A knife strikes a chopping board. A kettle shivers toward boiling. The smell of onions thickens, joined by potatoes, coffee, and coal dust. In fair weather, kitchens often remain partly invisible to boarders like you. They send up meals, warmth, and washed linen, as if by natural law. Today, the storm has pulled back the curtain. You reach the lower floor and see the work behind the comfort. The kitchen is narrow, hot near the range and freezing near the back door. Steam clouds the windows from within, while snow seals them from without. A cook stands at the table with her sleeves pinned up, slicing potatoes into a large bowl. Her hair is wrapped in a cloth, and flour dust marks one cheek. She moves with the practical anger of someone who has planned breakfast for 12 and now faces weather for thousands. The stove glows with red seams. Its iron surface radiates heat that touches your face before you enter fully. Near the scuttle, a boy no older than 14 shakes snow from a cap. He has been sent from a nearby shop, carrying a paper bundle under his coat. The bundle contains yeast cakes, or so he claims with great pride. The cook receives them as if they are diplomatic documents. Bread is not romantic until supply becomes doubtful. Then it becomes civilization in a crust. You stand out of the way, because kitchens are republics with strict borders. The landlady sits at a small table, writing figures on a slate. Coal, bread, milk, candles, lamp oil, potatoes, rent, patience. Only some of those can be counted accurately. She asks the boy what the streets are like. He answers while thawing his fingers near the stove. The snow is above his knees in some places, packed hard in others, and wicked at the corners. He says carts are stuck along the avenue. He sees a bakery man has hitched 3 horses to one wagon and still cannot turn. He says a policeman fell into a drift and came out missing his dignity. The cook asks whether he brought the yeast. He points to the bundle. She says dignity can be replaced. Yeast cannot. You almost laugh, then turn it into a cough. The mainstream fact rests plainly in the kitchen's heat. During the blizzard, daily work did not vanish just because travel became dangerous. Cooks, servants, shopkeepers, police officers, stable hands, and delivery boys kept trying to maintain ordinary life. Their efforts made the difference between discomfort and real danger for many households. History loves the word paralysis, but paralysis was uneven. Some systems stopped. Some people worked harder. You are given a cup of weak coffee because you're standing there looking useless. This is fair. The cup is thick, chipped, and warm enough to make your palms tingle. The coffee tastes bitter and smoky, with a faint flavour of yesterday's grounds. You drink it gratefully. Near the back door, snow has pushed through a crack and formed a little white ridge inside the kitchen. A servant has placed a coal shovel against it, as if guarding a frontier. The ridge glitters in the stovelight. Outside that door lies the service yard, now mostly a drifted wall. The ash bins are buried. The coal hatch is nearly covered. The delivery entrance may be there in theory, which is helpful only to philosophers. A man from the cellar emerges carrying a scuttle filled halfway. His shoulders are powdered with frost. He says the cellar window is packed solid, and the coal pile must be reached by lantern. The landlady's pencil pauses. The cook keeps cutting. The boy stares at the potatoes with open interest, which does not escape notice. A heel of bread appears in his hand shortly after. Through one of those kitchen mercies, no account book records. He eats it quickly, steam rising from his cap as he warms. The room holds many kinds of heat. The stove gives physical heat. The coffee gives brief courage. The onion pan gives playground and hope. The people give the rest, though some of them would deny it if praised. From the front of the house comes a knock, 3 heavy blows separated by gusts. Everyone pauses. The sound repeats. The landlady rises, taking the lamp from the table. You follow at a polite distance, drawn by the thrill of any arrival during a storm. In the hallway, the air shifts colder. The front door resists, then opens just enough to reveal a man crusted in snow. His beard is white with ice. His eyelashes are lumped. He carries a leather satchel under his arm, protected beneath an extra scarf. For a moment, he seems less like a messenger than a Subank with opinions. He is a clerk from the apothecary around the corner, bringing medicine for the older lodger upstairs. The apothecary has sent it by hand because no wagon can pass. The landlady takes the packet with careful thanks. The man stamps his feet and snow falls from him in heavy clumps. His boots leave dark wet marks on the floorboards. He refuses to come in farther, saying he has 2 more deliveries and 1 foolish promise to regret. Someone asks whether the shop is open. He says the door opens, which is not the same thing. Then he pulls his scarf across his mouth and steps back into the white. The door closes against the wind. His brief presence leaves behind cold air, wet boards, and the smell of camphor from the packet. Medicine has arrived by stubbornness. That seems to be the city's main transport method today. You carry the packet upstairs at the landlady's request. The older lodger's room is near the back, where the wind sounds different against the wall. You knock and enter after a rasping answer. The room smells of liniment, wool blankets, extinguished matches and closed air. He lies propped on pillows, his face pale beneath a grey moustache. A small stove near the wall gives weak warmth. On the chair beside him rests a folded newspaper, spectacles, and a cup of something cooling. His hand trembles slightly when he reaches for the medicine. He thanks you with formal dignity, as if receiving a diplomatic envoy. You place the packet close and ask whether he needs more coal. He says no, then glances at the stove. That glance tells the truth faster than manners. You take the scuttle, find 2 lumps from the landing supply, and feed the little stove. The room warms by almost nothing, but almost nothing is still something. He tells you he came to New York as a young man when Broadway mud could swallow a boot. He has seen winters before, he says. This one is behaving like a committee with no chairman. His humour comes slowly, but it comes. A framed photograph on his table shows a woman in a dark dress beside a child. Their faces are still, solemn, and remote in the old photographic way. The storm outside makes the photograph feel less like memory and more like company. Before you leave, he mentions a story from the old streets. Some people once believed that tying strips of red flannel around carriage wheels gave better grip in snow. He cannot say whether it worked. He can say it made the wheels look embarrassed. That is enough. The quirky tidbit settles in your mind as you return to the hall. Red flannel, barrel staves, cats at cellar doors, knees predicting weather. People face uncertainty by inventing patterns and tying them to practical objects. Sometimes the pattern helps. Sometimes only the tying helps. Downstairs, the lamps are being moved where they are needed most. One stands by the stairs. One goes to the kitchen. One remains in the parlour, where the fire is now carefully rationed. Shadows gather in corners, soft but watchful. You notice how different the house feels by lamp rather than daylight. Faces become gentler. Walls recede. Hands seem important as they pass cups, cloths, spoons, coal, and medicine. The storm has turned every errand into a ceremony. A trip to the kitchen requires boots. A journey to the front door requires courage. A visit upstairs with medicine becomes almost heroic, though nobody says so. Historians still debate how much the blizzard altered private habits compared with public systems. Some emphasize infrastructure, arguing that failed wires and trains drove lasting reforms. Others look to domestic diaries and letters, where fear, boredom, labour, and neighbourly exchange fill the record. Both kinds of history are present around you. The city may later bury wires and rethink transit. The house, meanwhile, is learning who has dry matches. You pause in the hallway outside the parlour. Within someone reads aloud from yesterday's newspaper, choosing items now made absurd by the storm. A theatre notice promises a lively performance. A shipping report lists vessels expected to arrive. An advertisement claims a tonic strengthens nerves against every trial of modern life. The listeners enjoy that one. Someone suggests sending a bottle to the elevated railway. The laughter is tired but genuine. Then the lamp flickers. Every face turns toward it. The flame narrows, lengthens, and steadies again. The room exhales. Light is no longer background. It is a participant. You step back toward the stairs, carrying the smell of onion and lamp oil in your clothes. Outside, the wind combs the building with icy fingers. Inside, small flames answer from room to room. There is no grand rescue, no trumpet, no magnificent speech. There are errands. There is coffee. There are lamps cleaned by careful hands. There is medicine delivered through drifts by a man who probably wishes he sold something lighter. You climb slowly, hearing the house settle into its storm routine. Gaslight trembles behind glass. Coal clicks in grates. Somewhere, a kettle begins again. The city may be halted, but the corridors are alive. You stand at the window and understand that the room has lost its view. The snow is no longer simply pressed against the glass. It has climbed, hardened, and settled into a wall with a faint blue heart. Light enters through it slowly, filtered and thickened, like daylight passing through milk. The lower sash is entirely covered. Only the topmost pane offers a dim glimpse of moving whiteness and one blurred chimney. The chimney seems to float without a building beneath it. For a sleepy moment, you feel the whole city has sunk under snow, leaving only roofs and smoke. Your hand touches the glass. The cold bites instantly through your fingertips. You pull back and rub them together, listening to the dry whisper of skin. There is no street below, not in any meaningful sense. There is a trench somewhere under the drift, perhaps a curb, perhaps a buried wheel, perhaps a doorstep. Manhattan has become a city of hidden edges. The room feels smaller because the outside world has moved closer. Usually air keeps a polite distance. Today the storm leans right against the wall. The silence is not complete, but it is deeply padded. A shovel strikes below with a dull note. Then another answers farther away. The sounds arrive slowly, separated by wind and effort. You open the door and find the hallway brighter than expected. People have gathered near the stairwell, drawn by news, cold, and the human need to inspect trouble. A boy from the top floor says the snow has reached the second landing window at the rear. Someone tells him not to exaggerate. He swears by his mother, which is not helpful, because his mother lives in Hoboken. The landlady sends him for a broom anyway. This is how authority handles wonder. You follow the little procession toward the back stairs. There, a narrow window looks onto the yard. Snow fills the space below in great uneven folds. A fence has vanished completely. Only the black tip of a post shows where a boundary once stood. The wash line hangs low under a white rope of ice and snow. 3 clothespins cling to it, absurdly brave. The back door is sealed from the outside. A servant pushes experimentally against it, then shakes her head. The yard has become a room without permission. The snow has taken the shape of stairs, barrels, bins, and hidden crates. Everything softened, rounded, and made anonymous. You smell damp wood, coal smoke, cold plaster, and boiled potatoes rising from below. The atmosphere is strangely intimate, as if the building and the weather have been forced into conversation. Somebody says the drifts are higher than doorways on certain streets. That sounds impossible until you remember the window downstairs. Wind does not lay snow evenly. It sculpts it, steals it from open places, and throws it against walls with stubborn artistry. In sheltered corners, snow can gather to astonishing heights. During the Great Blizzard of 1888, some New York drifts were reported many feet high, sometimes burying doors and lower windows. Snowfall totals were impressive, but the wind made the real architecture. It built banks, ridges, tunnels, and white cliffs across ordinary streets. The city did not merely receive snow, it was rearranged by it. You borrow a stool, wear a scarf, and descend toward the front entrance. This time, the door opens after serious negotiation. 2 men push from inside while another digs from outside with a coal shovel. Cold air enters with a force that makes the hallway gasp. Snow slides across the threshold in sparkling grains. The outside man appears slowly, face red, beard wet, hat bent under frost. He is the building's janitor, though today he looks more like an explorer who took a wrong turn near the Arctic. His shovel is too small for the job. Most tools are too small for history. He steps inside, stamping, and reports that a passage now reaches the street trench. Passage is a terrorist word. You wrap your scarf over your mouth and follow him out, because curiosity is a poor guardian of comfort. The stoop has become a steep white slope. A path has been carved through it, with walls of snow rising on either side. The railing disappears and reappears in fragments, like a thought half remembered. Your boots sink at each step, sometimes into boiled powder, sometimes onto hard packed layers. Snow squeaks beneath you. The sound is high and intimate, close to your feet. The air smells clean at first, then smoky, then horsey, then clean again. Weather has mixed the city without asking. At the bottom of the stoop, the street is almost unrecognizable. Buildings still stand, but the sea and the space between them has changed scales. Drifts curve against doorways and shop fronts, some nearly reaching signboards. A baker's awning sags under a white load. One gas lamp leans at an angle, its glass hood crusted with ice. The buried rails of the horse cars are gone completely. Where traffic should pass, there are trenches dug by hands and shovels. People move through them slowly, shoulders hunched, heads lowered, faces wrapped. They look less like pedestrians than miners of daylight. The wind blows loose snow from roof edges in ghostly veils. A woman in a dark cloak pauses near a corner, clutching a basket beneath her shawl. A man reaches to steady her as she steps over a hard ridge. Both nod without ceremony, then continue in all opposite directions. Small courtesies appear quickly when the pavement disappears. You hear scraping everywhere. Shovels bite into packed drifts, strike hidden stone, pause, lift, and throw. The rhythm is uneven but persistent. A shopkeeper clears the area before his door, only for the wind to refill it. He stares at the sky with the expression of a man being personally mocked by heaven. Another man laughs and tells him to charge the snow rent. The joke is poor, but it survives the weather. You notice a dog standing atop a drift beside a lamppost. It looks down at everyone with a deep satisfaction. The dog has discovered social elevation. No one knows how it climbed there. Possibly no one wishes to admit being outmaneuvered by a terrier. A child points and laughs, then is pulled along by an anxious older sister. The dog sneezes, shakes its ears, and becomes a local landmark. The quirky tidbit of the morning belongs to these improvised landmarks. People begin giving names to the largest drifts almost at once. One heap near a corner is called Mount Broadway by a man who's never seen a mountain. Another ridge outside a grocer's door becomes the White Elephant, because it blocks everything and benefits nobody. Nobody will record the claims of officially. Yet for the hour, they guide movement better than street signs buried under snow. You step into a trench where snow walls rise nearly to your chest. The passage narrows, then turns around a buried cart. Only the cart's rear wheel and one shaft show above the drift. The rest has disappeared into whiteness. Someone has tied a red rag to the wheel so people do not walk directly into it. That rag flaps in the wind like a tiny surrender flag. A horse blanket lies half buried nearby, stiff with ice. You hope the horse has been led safely somewhere warm. The thought stays with you longer than expected. From this low path, the city feels almost archaeological. You are walking among exposed fragments of civilization. A doorstep here, a signboard there, a boot scraper like a black tooth in snow, a cellar grate breathing faint warmth through a crust of ice. Every familiar object now requires rediscovery. Historians still debate whether the blizzard's most powerful legacy came from public disaster or private memory. Official accounts measure snow, blocked lines, deaths, and reforms. Personal recollections often linger on stranger images, like windows filled with snow or people walking through tunnels down avenues. Both kinds of memory matter. One explains system, the other explains what it felt like to have the city altered at eye level. You pause beside a shop window almost buried to its lettering. Inside, through frost and gloom, you glimpse tins, jars, candles, soap, and hanging scales. The door is half cleared, but a drift presses against the lower panels. A boy inside has drawn a face in the fogged glass. It smiles stupidly at the storm. Behind him, an adult hand wipes the face away. A new face appears almost immediately. Humanity continues. At the corner, a group of men work together to open a path across the avenue. Their clothing marks different stations in life. One wears a clerk's dark coat, another a labourer's patched jacket, another a watchman's heavy cape. A fourth has fine gloves now renowned by practical usefulness. They dig side by side, breathing hard, passing remarks between gusts. Snow collects on shoulders and hat brim. Their faces shine with sweat despite the cold. The labour is clumsy at first, then finds a rhythm. Cut, lift, toss. Cut, lift, toss. A woman from an upstairs window lowers a pail tied to a rope. It holds hot coffee in a covered tin pot. The men cheer gently, as if cheering too loudly might invite more weather. One lifts his cup toward the window. The gesture is theatrical, grateful, and exactly the right size for the moment. Steam rises and disappears. You stand aside, letting shovellers pass with a loadsud of snow. The packed walls around you smell faintly of street dirt, coal ash, and winter freshness. Snow in a city is never purely white for long. It gathers the lives it decovers. You can see grey layers where wheels churned yesterday's slush beneath the new fall. Black flecks of soot pepper the surface near chimneys. Straw from stables sticks out in golden threads. The storm may look clean from above, but at street level it is honest. Carries horses, fires, boots, roofs, gutters, and hands. A man tries to open a cellar door near your feet. He clears the outline with a shovel, then pulls at an iron ring. The door lifts a few inches, releases a breath of warmer air, and stops. Snow packed along the hinges holds it fast. He mutters something that the wind kindly edits. Another man joins him. Together they pry, scrape, pull, and finally raise it enough for a boy to slip through. The boy vanishes downward and returns with 2 loaves of bread wrapped inside his coat. The small crowd near the trench watches with admiration. Bread from beneath the snow has the aura of treasure. The loaves are dark, dense, and slightly flattened. They smell faintly sour and warm. That smell moves through the cold air with almost unfair power. Your stomach answers immediately. You had not realized how hungry you were. The bread is carried away toward a boarding house door, guarded like medicine. The city's needs have become visible in the open air. Doors must open. Paths must connect. Fuel must move. Food must appear. Windows must hold. People must keep count of one another. You turn back toward the building when the wind sharpens. It slips through your scarf and finds your teeth. Your eyes water. Snow crystals strike your cheeks with tiny pricks, like cold sparks. The trench back to the stoop seems longer than it was. A man passing in the opposite direction tips his hat, then nearly loses it to a gust. He catches it against his chest with wounded dignity. You climb the white slope slowly, gripping the exposed bit of railing. At the top, you look once more toward the avenue. The city is not vanished. It has become something lower, narrower, slower, and more communal. Movement now depends on channels made by effort. Every step is a negotiation between body and weather. Every open doorway feels earned. Inside, the hallway warmth surrounds you with smells of onion, ash, lamp oil, and people. Snow clings to your sleeves and melts in dark spots. Your boots leave prints that will annoy someone shortly. You close the door with help from the janitor, shutting out the bright roaring cold. The sudden quiet feels almost soft. You stand there breathing, cheeks burning, fingers numb, carrying in your mind the buried cart, the terrier on the drift, the bread from the cellar, the men digging together. The windowed room upstairs will still be half sealed. The snow will still press against the glass. Yet now that white wall has a city inside it, full of tunnels, names, tools, jokes, steam, and stubborn footsteps. You climb the stairs, each step warmer than the street. Behind you, shovels resume their dull rhythm outside. Within the house, cups clink and floorboards answer. The storm has raised walls higher than doorways, but people have begun cutting doors through the walls. You hear the wires before anyone speaks of them. The sound comes through the wall in faint, trembling notes, high and uneasy. At first it seems like wind combing the edge of a roof. Then it becomes sharper, a thin metallic singing that rises and falls with each gust. You stand near the window, where the snow has sealed the lower glass. Somewhere outside, overhead lines are straining under ice, snow, and their own ambition. Manhattan's sky is crowded with wires in this age. Telegraph wires, telephone wires, fire alarm wires, electric light wires, messenger lines, and private company lines cross above streets in dense black webs. They hang from poles, rooftops, brackets, and improvised supports. In fine weather, they make the modern city feel connected and clever. In this storm, they look like a giant harp being played by disaster. A cracking sound snaps across the air. It is followed by a hiss, a loose twang, and a cry from the street below. You move toward the door at once. Other tenants are already gathering in the hallway. all wearing the same expression. It is the look people have when they hear civilization break a string. The landlady comes from the parlour with her lamp raised. Someone asks whether a chimney has fallen. Someone else says it was a wire. The older lodger, standing wrapped in 2 shawls, says wires fall like snakes when iced. This is not comforting. It is also difficult to ignore. You descend carefully, moving toward the front room where the curtains have been pulled aside. The parlour window gives a higher view over the trench in the street. Beyond the snow ridges, poles lean under white loads. Lines sag between buildings in great dark loops. Some are coated so thickly with ice that they gleam like glass ropes. The wind plucks them. They hum. They tremble. They snap. Another line breaks loose and swings down into the snow, striking adrift with a soft whipping motion. Several people step back inside the trench, lifting their arms as though the wire can still see them. Nobody knows which wires are dangerous. That is part of the trouble. Telegraph and telephone lines carry information rather than heavy current, but electric lighting has entered the city too. Fire alarm wires serve public safety. Private lines serve business convenience. From the street, one black strand looks much like another. Modern progress has become a tangle, and the storm has strong opinions about tangles. The mainstream fact is clear in the parlour's cold light. The blizzard severely damaged overhead communication lines across New York City. Telegraph and telephone service failed in many places, and fire alarms became unreliable. The storm helped persuade officials and companies that overhead wires were a serious hazard. The great connected city suddenly found itself cut into quiet pieces. You watch a man in the trench point upward with his shovel. He warns a woman away from a sagging line near the corner. She stops, looks up, and decides the long way home is suddenly quite attractive. The wind lifts her shirt hem and fills it with snow. She gathers it with her both hands and moves carefully along the safer path. A messenger boy appears from the white curtain at the avenue crossing. He carries a leather pouch strapped across his chest and a cap pulled low over his ears. His face is red, wet, and set with fierce importance. A dangling wire blocks his path, hanging at shoulder height between 2 poles. He ducks beneath it, then hesitates as it sways. A man shouts for him to wait. The boy waits, though every bone in his body clearly resents the delay. 2 shovelers lift the wire with a wooden rake handle and hold it clear. The boy slips under, mutters thanks, and disappears toward the next trench. The little drama lasts less than a minute. Yet everyone watching understands the message. When wires fail, feet return to their old authority. News must be carried through cold by lungs, boots, and stubborn young persons who are paid too little. Inside the parlour, a gentleman who once invested in a telephone company explains that this is a temporary inconvenience. His voice suggests temporary inconveniences happen mainly to other people. The servant girl near the doorway asks whether his company buried its wires. He clears his throat. Not yet, he says. A coal shifts in the grate at that exact moment, which feels rude but useful. The room accepts the answer without mercy. You leave the window and move into the hallway, drawn by a clamour near the front door. A police officer has arrived, asking whether anyone has seen a fallen line sparking near the corner. His coat is stiff with frozen snow and his helmet brim drips steadily onto the floor. A small icicle hangs from one side of his moustache. He smells of wet wool, leather, cold iron, and the street. The landlady directs him toward the shop front 2 doors down. He listens, nods, and writes something in a notebook with the fingers that can hardly bend. The pencil point breaks. He looks at it with deep personal disappointment. The cook appears and hands him a shorter pencil from her apron. He accepts it as if receiving military reinforcement. There is no hurry in his manner, only tired discipline. He must move through blocked streets, warn people from live or unknown wires, carry reports, and answer frightened questions. Police work in a blizzard is mostly walking into places where others prefer not to go. Before leaving, he asks whether the older lodger's medicine arrived. The landlady says so. He says qu'elle s'appelle Bastard. He nods again, relieved by one small item removed from the storm's account. Then he steps back into the wind, holding his collar tight. The door closes, and the hallway smells briefly of snow and authority. You imagine the police station nearby, warmed by a stove and crowded with reports. Fallen wires, blocked doors, missing horses, stranded passengers, frozen switches, fire alarms that may not ring, citizens whose courage collapses once they are indoors and able to describe it. The city has become a field of interruptions. Each interruption must be understood, carried, written down, and answered somehow. Without reliable wires, information travels unevenly. One block may know of danger. Another may learn an hour late. Rumours fill the gaps with impressive speed. Already the house has 3 versions of the same accident. In one, a whole pole fell and crushed a carriage. In another, sparks danced across a snowbank like blue devils. In the third, a lawyer was trapped inside a telephone booth, though no one can explain why he was there. The last version becomes popular. A lawyer unable to communicate is too tempting a vision. The quirky tidbit of the day settles around an old urban fear. Some New Yorkers called the overhead wire tangles deadly cobwebs in conversation and newspapers. People complained that the sky over certain streets looked netted, trapped, and blackened by progress. Line workers sometimes had to identify wires by memory, route, owner, or desperate guesswork. It was not a system designed for icy elegance. Outside, a broken wire drags lightly across a snowbank and leaves a thin dark groove. The groove fills almost immediately with new snow. The storm erases evidence even while creating emergencies. You return upstairs and find your room quieter than the rest of the house. The wire hum is stronger here, passing through the walls and window frame. You sit on the bed and feel the vibration faintly in the floorboards. It is not loud, it is intimate. The room smells of cold coal ash, damp towel, wool, and the fading spice of ginger. The lamp flame is small, turned low to save oil. On the table, the biscuit remains undefeated. You pick it up, consider it, and put it down again. Some struggles are better delayed. From the upper pane, you can see one cluster of wires crossing between buildings. They sag in catenary curves, a word no one needs at bedtime but engineers might appreciate. Ice thickens them into pale cords. Snow gathers along the top, then slips away in little avalanches when the wind shakes them. One strand vibrates rapidly, producing that thin, unsettled note. It is eerie, but not entirely unpleasant. The city's nerves are singing. You think of messages that cannot pass. A merchant downtown waiting for prices from another city. A family in Brooklyn trying to learn whether a relative reached home. A newspaper office seeking reports from police, ferries, railway stations, and hospitals. A firehouse depending on alarm boxes that may be frozen, broken, or silent. A broker with no quotation, a doctor with no call, a husband with no telegram, a mother with no reassurance. Communication is visible until it failed. Then absence becomes a room everyone can enter. Historians continue to argue over how direct the line was between the blizzard and the movement to bury wires underground. Some point to the storm as a turning point that made overhead systems publicly intolerable. Others say legal battles, company interests, and municipal reform had already been moving slowly in that direction. The snow did not invent the problem. It made the problem impossible to ignore. That is one of weather's specialties. It reveals what polite meetings have postponed. A new sound interrupts your thoughts. 3 sharp knocks come from the wall beside the bed. You freeze, then hear 2 more. The young woman next door calls through the plaster, asking whether your lamp still burns. You answer that it does. She says hers has gone out, and her matches are damp. You take the candle from your table, light it from your lamp, and carry it into the hall. The flame bends in the draught, blue at the base, gold at the tip. You cup your hand around it, feeling warmth lick your palm. At her door, she opens just enough for light to enter her room. Her face appears pale in the candle glow, but calm. Behind her, The room is nearly dark, except for snowlight from the window. She thanks you and touches her wick to your flame. For a moment, the two small fires lean toward each other. Then her lamp catches. Light fills the room in a trembling circle. You smell fresh lamp oil and cold linen. No wire carries the this signal. No company owns it. One flame simply gives itself to another. She smiles and says that perhaps this is the older technology saving the newer century. You say the candle has been waiting for its moment of intellectual triumph. The hallway approves in silence. You return to your room with the candle, careful not to spill wax. The act has warmed you oddly. It is not heroic, not difficult, not worthy of grand retelling. Still, the house feels less separated now. Where communication fails above the street, small connections form behind doors. People knock through walls. They pass notes by hand. They shout from windows. They lower baskets on ropes. They send children through trenches with messages tucked inside coats. The city becomes slower but not mute. You sit again by the window and watch a line break loose from its burden. It snaps without drama, more like a sigh than an explosion. One end falls out of sight. The remaining length swings and strikes a brick wall, leaving a dark mark in the snow crust. No one below is hurt. A man looks up, makes a sign with one hand, and moves away briskly. The storm keeps writing lessons in the air. You listen to the humming wires, the low wind, the stove's weak breath, and the distant scrape of shovels. The sounds layer gently, each one softer than fear expects. Manhattan has not lost its voice entirely. It has only lost the sharp, instant voice of wires. What remains is slower, nearer, more human. A knock. A call. A lampshade. A policeman's question at the door. A messenger boy ducking under danger with his pouch tight against his ribs. Your eyelids grow heavy in the dim room. Outside, snow continues to gather on the wires until they bow like tired lines of ink. Inside, the lamp burns steadily beside the bed. The flame is small, but it answers the night without needing permission. You wake hungry enough to respect every crumb in the room. The biscuit on the table, once a joke between you and survival, now seems almost handsome. It sits in its paper wrapping with the confidence of a small brick. You break it carefully against the table edge. The sound is louder than expected. One half skitters away, strikes the lamp base, and comes to rest beside the matchbox. You pick it up, dust it with your thumb, and take a cautious bite. It tastes of flour, salt, air, and stubbornness. Your jaw works patiently. Some foods must be negotiated. The room is dim and colder than it should be, though the snow outside has softened the daylight. You can smell damp wool from your coat, coal ash from the grate, and the faint sourness of old crumbs. The fire has gone nearly dead. Only a dull red eye remains beneath grey powder. You stir it gently and add one careful lump of coal. The flame takes its time returning. So does hope, sometimes. From below comes a new kind of sound. It is not panic, not laughter, not the scrape of shovels. It is the murmuring of people discussing provisions. Food talk has a special tone. It is practical on the surface and emotional underneath. You hear words rising through the stairwell. Bread, milk, coal, potatoes, price, delivery, enough. That last word hangs longer than the others. Enough is a small word, enormous weather inside it. You wash your face with water that feels personally offended by warmth. Then you dress in layers, each one adding bulk and dignity in unequal measure. The hallway greets you with the smell of cabbage soup beginning somewhere below. It is not yet soup, exactly. It is the idea of soup rehearsing itself. A tenant stands near the landing, trying to brush snowmelt from his cuffs. He says the grocer at the corners has opened through a side entrance. Another says the grocer has almost nothing left except beans and candles. A third insists candles are nourishment for the spirit, which receives no applause. People are becoming selective about philosophy. You go downstairs with the others, drawn by hunger and news. The parlour has become an exchange floor for rumours rather than stocks. Chairs are pulled into loose circles. Mittens dry near the grate. A map of the neighbourhood. drawn badly on a paper bag, lies on the sill. Someone has marked open shops with dots, blocked crossings with scratches, and dangerous wires with dramatic loops. It is not accurate, but it is deeply felt. A young clerk claims a bakery near 6th Avenue is selling loaves through a window. The older lodger says a man would claim anything near 6th Avenue if breakfast depended on it. The servant girl reports that milk has not arrived. This creates the silence usually reserved for deaths in the family. Milk matters in a boarding house. It touches children, tea, coffee, porridge, invalids, and the moral stability of breakfast. The landlady appears from the kitchen with her slate. She says coffee will be thinner, porridge will be stretched, and complaints may be served cold. Her expression suggests this is not a negotiation. The mainstream fact of the city's condition is plain. The blizzard disrupted food and fuel deliveries across Manhattan, especially where wagons, horses, ferries, and rail connections failed. Many shops opened with limited stock, while households depended on stored staples. Coal became as important as bread, because warmth shaped every other decision. A hungry city is anxious. A cold, hungry city becomes philosophical in a dangerous way. You join two tenants going out to the grocer, partly to help and partly to see. The landlady gives you a list folded twice and protected inside a scrap of oilcloth. Beans, flour, candles, onions, tea, any milk, any eggs, any coal information. The phrase any coal information seems almost funny until you step outside. Cold enters your lungs like a legal document. The trench has widened, but the snow walls remain high and dirty along the edges. The sky is pale grey, moving fast with low cloud. Wind lifts loose crystals from the drift tops and sends them skimming like dry smoke. Your boots crunch into packed snow, then slip on hidden ices. The tenant ahead of you carries a basket. The one behind you carries a shovel, because everyone has learned humility. The street smells of coal smoke, horse manure trapped under snow to damp wood, and bakery steam from somewhere unseen. That bakery smell is unfair. It moves through the cold air with soft golden authority. People in the trench turn their heads toward it, as if smelling a hymn. At the corner, a man pulls a sled loaded with few sacks. Two boys push from behind, laughing whenever the sled lurches sideways. The sacks may contain flour, meal, or something less dramatic, but everyone watches them anyway. Food in motion is public theatre now. A woman asks whether he has bread for sale. He says no, only oats for horse. Several faces fall. A horse nearby lifts its head, perhaps feeling appreciated at last. You reach the grocer by a side alley, where customers queue between white banks of snow. Queue is a civilized word for people freezing in order. The shop door cannot open fully, so purchases pass through a cleared gap beside it. Inside, shelves are dimly visible. Tins, sacks, jars, barrels, and hanging measures crowd the narrow space. The grocer stands behind a counter wearing gloves with the fingertips cut away. His moustache is damp from his own breath. A lamp smokes above him, giving the shop a yellow and brown twilight. The smell inside reaches you in waves. Coffee beans, kerosene, molasses, onions, soap, dried apples, and wet boots. It is the smell of ordinary supply made precious by difficulty. The grocer insists he is not raising prices. He says this several times, which naturally causes everyone to examine him with interest. One woman says she paid less for beans when Grant was president. The grocer replies that beans also had better manners then. Nobody leaves. Everyone needs something. Your turn comes after a long shivering awaits. You hand over the list. The grocer reads it and gives a soft snort at eggs. Eggs, he says, have become a rumour with shells. Milk is impossible. Candles, limited. Tea, a little. Beans, yes. Onions, yes. Flour, some. Coal information, regrettably abundant and useless. He says the coal yard is reachable by determined men with shovels and poor judgment. You purchase what can be had. The parcels are wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. They feel heavier than their size should allow, because need adds weight. Outside, and the basket is loaded with. A man in line asks whether there is sugar left. The grocer says yes, but not enough for everyone's optimism. This produces a tired ripple of amusement. The quirky tidbit comes from a rumour passed along the queue. Someone claims a fashionable family uptown sent a footman through the snow to fetch oysters. The footman returned with turnips, saying the oysters had sensibly remained at sea. No one can verify the stories. No one wants it verified. It is useful exactly as it is. Storm gossip is a form of social heating. It warms people by giving them someone ridiculous to imagine. The return journey is slower because the basket pulls at your arm. Snow begins again in light, dry flakes, tapping against hats and sleeves. At a crossing, 3 men argue over whether a cleared path is public or belongs to the shopkeeper who dug it. The argument is fierce, formal, and entirely cold. A police officer ends it by ordering everyone to move before they freeze in possession of the point. The phrase "possession of the point" pleases you greatly. You store it away like a little coal coal for later. Near a stable, the smell changes. Warm animal breath pushes through cracks in the door. Inside, horses shift and stamp on straw, restless but sheltered. A stable hand leads one toward the entrance, testing the path beyond. The animal's coat steams in the cold, and its dark eye watches the snow with grave suspicion. Horses remain essential to the city's food and fuel supply, yet the storm has made their work dangerous. Without them, wagons do not move. With them, wagons may still not move. The arrangement feels insulting to everyone involved. A coal wagon stands buried to its axles nearby. 2 men dig around the wheels while a third spreads ashes for traction. The ashes darken the snow in rough patches. A boy carries more in a pail, scattering them like seed. Black ash on white snow becomes a path for survival. Not pretty, easy boy, perhaps. Very useful. Historians still argue whether shortages during the blizzard were mainly failures of transport or failures of preparation. Some point to blocked rail lines, frozen ferries, and disabled wagons. Others note that crowded urban households often had little storage space and limited money for reserves. In the trench, with beans cutting into your palm through the basket handle, the distinction feels both important and incomplete. A city can be well supplied on paper and still hungry at the table. You return to the boarding house with cheeks burning and fingers stiff. The hallway seems wonderfully warm, though it would have disappointed you yesterday. The landlady takes the parcels and checks each item against the list. Her face gives nothing away until she sees the tea. Then one eyebrow relaxes. This is celebration in administrative form. The cook receives the onions and beans with professional seriousness. She says beans can become many things if spoken to firmly. You believe her. In the kitchen, the soup has found its identity. Steam rises from the pot, carrying cabbage, onion, potato, and something meaty enough to encourage faith. The windows are fogged completely, and droplets creep down the glass. Near the range, damp mittens hang on a string. A cat you have not noticed before sleeps under the table, paws tucked beneath its chest. It has chosen the warmest spot with the unearned confidence of nobility. The boy from the shop appears again, this time without yeast but with the news. He says a coal dealer has opened a narrow path to 1 yard. He says men are hauling sacks on sleds because wagons cannot manage the turn. He says the price is fair or unfair, depending on who is talking. He also says someone found a ham in a snowdrift, which the cook immediately rejects as morally unsound. The landlady asks, whose ham? The boy shrugs. The kitchen considers the ethics of drift ham for several silent seconds. Then the cook says soup is ready. Moral philosophy retreats. You carry bowls to the parlour with the servant girl. The soup is thin but hot enough to fog your face. Each bowl warms the hands before feeding the stomach. People receive them with gratitude disguised as manners. The older lodger takes his slowly, nodding as though approving a treaty. The young clerk eats too quickly and burns his tongue. This gives him something to do besides discuss offices. Bread's cut into careful slices, thinner than anyone prefers. No one complains. Crusts are prized. A drop of soup on the table is wiped with bread and consumed with dignity. Outside, the snow continues to muffle the city. Inside, the sound of spoons becomes gentle and steady. Spoon against bowl, breath over steam, chair legs shifting, fire settling. It is a humble orchestra, but it keeps time. The atmosphere in the room changes as hunger eases. Faces loosen, shoulders lower. Conversation becomes less sharp around the edges. Someone tells another story about an office safe supposedly buried behind a drift inside its own lobby. Someone else says money's finally learning what flour feels like. The parlour enjoys that one. You sit near the window with your bowl, feeling heat move down through your chest. The soup tastes of onion, cabbage, salt, pepper, and rescue. It is not rich. It is exactly enough. That word returns gentler now. Enough can mean scarcity measured strictly. It can also mean a room sharing what it has. The landlady enters with the slate tucked under her arm. She says coal must last through the night, candles must be kept low, and anyone opening the front door for curiosity will be handed a shovel. No one doubts her. Outside, paths will need clearing again. Inside, bills will need planning again. Fuel will need counting, lamps filling, or rumours sorting, and tempers cooling. As the storm has not made life simple, it has made essentials simple. Bread, coal, warmth, water, light, trust. You hold the bowl close until the last steam fades. Beyond the curtain, the buried street waits in white patience. Somewhere out there, coal moves on stools and sleds. Beans pass through shop gaps, milk remains imaginary, and oysters continue their wise absence from Manhattan. In here, the spoon rests in the empty bowl. Your hands are warm. For the moment, that is enough. You notice the parlour has changed its shape without moving any walls. Chairs that once faced politely toward the fire now turn toward one another. The table has been cleared of yesterday's papers and crowded with cups, sewing, cards, and a single candle. A blanket lies across the back of the sofa, shared by two people who were strangers yesterday. No one has announced this rearrangement. The storm has simply edited the room. You enter with your bowl washed and your hands still faintly smelling of cabbage soap. The warmth inside feels lower than before, rationed and careful, yet more human. A fire can be so small and still gather a room. The coal glows behind the grate in red caves and black ridges. Each time the fire shifts, shadows lift along the wallpaper vines and settle again. Outside the windows, Deborah rubs against the glass in soft, uneven strokes. The sound is steady enough to become part of the furniture. You sit near the edge of the circle, close enough to feel heat on your shoes. The leather is drying at last, giving off a faint smell of wet road and boot polish. Your stockings itch. Your shoulders loosen. Around you, people hold cups more for warmth than thirst. A spoon rests in a saucer with a small silver click whenever someone moves. The young woman from the next room sits near the lamp, mending the torn lining of a glove. Her needle flashes briefly, disappears, and flashes again. The older lodger occupies the armchair by permission of age and cough. The young clerk has taken a footstool, which upset this kid's reduced opinions. The servant girl stands at first near the doorway, uncertain whether she belongs among the boarders. The landlady sees this and tells her to sit before she freezes artistically. That settles the matter. A chair is found. The servant girl sits with care, hands folded in her apron. Her relief is visible only in the way her shoulders drop. Class does not vanish in a storm. It loosens in moments, like a stiff collar unbuttoned after supper. The mainstream fact living inside this room is subtle but important. During great urban disasters, people often create temporary communities of shelter. Boarding houses, hotels, churches, shops, and even stranded vehicles become places where strangers share heat, news, food, and practical help. The blizzard made Manhattan's public streets dangerous, so indoor spaces became social lifeboats. You feel that truth in the quiet space between chairs. A man near the mantel suggests cards, then realizes nobody has a full deck. This seems symbolic and therefore annoying. The young clerk produces 27 cards from his coat pocket. He says they are enough for a game he learned from a cousin. The older lodger asks whether the cousin was in prison. The clerk says no, New Jersey. The distinction is accepted generously. Soon a confusing game begins on the table, using buttons as wagers. The rules change whenever the clerk is losing. Nobody believes him, but everyone permits the entertainment. There is a special mercy in harmless nonsense during bad weather. It gives the mind somewhere warm to go. The servant girl wins 3 buttons and blushes deeply. Then she wins 2 more and stops blushing. Talent adapts quickly. A gust strikes the house and shakes Snow from an upper ledge. It slides past the window with a heavy whisper, then lands outside in a muffled thump. Everyone pauses. The candle flame bends a little. The lamp chimney ticks softly. Then the card game resumes, though the wagers are now watched more closely. You listen to the room's textures. Wool sleeves brush chair arms. A needle pulls thread through cloth. Cards slap softly against the cell. Someone's breathing rattles slightly near the fire. The air smells of coal, lamp oil, soup, wet wool, lavender water, and a little tobacco clinging to an old coat. It is not a grand smell. It is the smell of people being together indoors. From the kitchen comes a burst of laughter. The cook has apparently told the boy that no respectable potato peels itself. He answers something you cannot hear. Another laugh follows, rounder and warmer. The sound travels through the hall and enters the parlour without needing invitation. The young woman looks up from her mending and smiles at nobody in particular. The older lodger begins telling a story about a winter long ago, when he boarded in a house near the Battery. He says the harbour froze thick enough in places that men walked where boats had been. Someone doubts him. He says doubt is the privilege of youth and the hobby of fools. The room approves this sentence. His voice grows steadier as he continues. He remembers ships locked in ice, sailors cursing in several languages, and boys daring one another onto frozen edges. He remembers a woman selling hot chestnuts from a brazier, her shawl crusted with frost. The chestnuts cracked in the heat, giving off a sweet, smoky smell. As he speaks, the parlour seems to widen. The storm outside remains, yet other winters enter softly. Past cold joins present cold. Memory becomes another blanket. Historians still debate how ordinary people understood extreme weather in the 19th century. Some evidence suggests storms were interpreted through religion, morality, or science, folklore, and plain habit all at once. Weather could be a divine warning, a natural event, a business disruption, or an excuse to avoid one's relatives. People rarely chose only one explanation. In this parlour, nobody sounds eager for a single meaning. The storm is trouble, spectacle, inconvenience, danger, wonder, and gossip all together. The quirky tidbit arrives when the servant girl tells her own story. She heard from a cousin that some families placed flat irons, warmed by the stove and wrapped in cloth, into beds before sleep. This is true enough, but her cousin's employer once forgot the cloth. The sheet scorched in the shape of the iron, leaving a perfect dark triangle. For weeks, the family called it the burned continent. The young clerk asks whether it was shaped like Africa. She says it was shaped like poor supervision. That wins the biggest laugh of the evening. Even the older lodger coughs himself into amusement. The servant girl lowers her eyes, pleased and shy. A small shift happens then. People begin asking her questions not as service, but as company. Where is she from? Does she have family nearby? Has she seen snow worse than this? She answers carefully at first, then with more ease. She is from a farm north of the city, where snow does not become nearly so dramatic about itself. She says country snow lies down properly in fields. City snow climbs walls, blocks doors, and behaves like a tenant behind on rent. This judgment is considered accurate. The landlady appears at the parlour door, hears the laughter, and pretends not to enjoy it. She carries a basket of small repairs collected from around the house. A torn apron, a split seam, a mitten with 2 fingers open to the world. She places it near the young woman with the needle. The young woman lifts one eyebrow. The landlady says idle hands feel the cold more sharply. The young woman says busy hands might like tea. A bargain is made without paperwork. Tea arrives, thin but hot, and sewing begins in its earnest. Buttons, seams, cuffs, hems, and practical pride pass from lap to lap. You are given a sock with a hole at the heel. You have no visible expertise. This is apparently irrelevant. Someone shows you how to hold a darning egg inside the sock. The wooden egg is smooth, worn, and warm from another hand. You push the needle through wool, clumsily at first. The thread catches. The older lodger watches your work and says the sock may survive, though its dignity is doubtful. You accept the review. There is comfort in performing a small useful task badly. It places you among people rather than merely near them. Outside, bells ring faintly, perhaps from a church, perhaps from a wagon, perhaps from some sound bent by snow. Inside, the candle burns lower. Wax gathers in a creamy pool around the wick. The room grows dimmer, but not darker in spirit. A few more people arrive from upstairs, drawn by warmth and voices. One brings a blanket. One brings a tin of peppermints saved from Christmas. The peppermints are passed around with absurd ceremony. Each person takes one, then pretends not to want another. The candy is cool, sharp, and sweet on your tongue. For a moment, it clears the taste of soup and smoke. It makes breathing feel easier. The younger boy from the kitchen enters, carrying fresh kindling. He sees the card game and lingers. The cook calls from the hallway that he is not to gamble away the kindling. He replies that he would demand excellent odds. The room laughs again. He grins, deposits the wood, and retreats before further labour can identify him. The social order bends but does not break. That is one of the evening's lessons. People who normally serve still serve. People who normally pay still sit. Yet warmth has gathered everyone nearer than rules intended. A shared dorm creates permissions that daylight may later withdraw. For now, the permission hold. You hear the young woman humming again, this time openly. The tune is slow with a rocking pattern that suits the wind. Another voice joins on the second line. Then a third, softer. No one announces a song. It simply appears. The words are old and familiar to several people, unfamiliar to others, unnecessary to you. The melody fills the room gently, settling over the cards, sewing, cups, and folded blankets. You do not sing at first. You listen. The sound touches the walls and returns warmer. Outside, the snow continues its cold work without applause. Inside, voices braid together, imperfect and kind. A man at the window lifts the curtain slightly and reports that the trench is filling again. Nobody rises. There will be shovel-in soon enough. The curtain falls back. For the length of the song, the city can remain buried. Your repaired sock begins to look less tragic. The young woman inspects it and says it will hold if not examined by daylight. This is high praise under current conditions. You place it in the basket and feel oddly proud. The servant girl has won another button at cards and now possesses the wealth of a small tailor. The older lodger sleeps lightly in his chair, chin tucked, one hand resting near his cup. His breathing is softer. The fire settles lower, and the landlady orders one more coal added. Only one? The lump lands in the grate with a hollow clack and slowly catches. The flame curls around it, blue at first, then orange. Everyone watches for a moment. People are easily hypnotized by fire when the world outside is white. The room quiets. Not silent, never quite. There is always a cough, a thread drawn, a chair shifting, a cup placed down. But the energy has softened. Even conversation becomes less about news and more about nearness. You feel the blanket edge touch your knee. Someone has spread it wider across the row of chairs. You do not ask who, you simply let it rest there. The wool is scratchy, warm and faintly scented with cedar and smoke. Your body accepts it before your thoughts finish thanking anyone. You look around the parlour and see faces made gentler by the low light. The clerk without his certainty. The servant girl with her buttons. The young woman with thread looped around her finger, the landlady counting everything except kindness, the older lodger dreaming near the grate. The storm has not made any of you noble. That would be too tidy. It has made you present. For one evening, presence is enough work. Snow presses at the windows, muffling Manhattan's pride, its schedules, its class lines, its noise. Inside, warmth moves through shared objects. A cup, a blanket, a needle, a story, a ridiculous card game with suspicious rules. You lean back and let the room breathe around you. The fire glows lower, but the circle holds. You step outside when the storm has weakened into a restless drifting mist. The air is still cold enough to sting your nostrils, but it no longer shoves you backward at every breath. Snowflakes wander rather than attack. They turn shapes in the pale light, uncertain where to land among so much competition. The sky hangs low over the rooftops, a dull silver lid above the city. Your boots meet packed snow at the stoop, hard now from many passing feet. The trench outside the house has widened into something almost respectable. Almost is doing heroic work. Walls of snow still rise along either side, grey at their lower layers and white above. Soot, straw, ash, crumbs, and splinters mark the sides like geological evidence of urban stubbornness. You can smell coal smoke everywhere. It hangs beneath the cold air, thick and bitter, mixed with wet wood, horse breath, and the faint sour odour of thawing refuse. Manhattan is beginning to dig itself back into existence. Not gracefully. Grace has taken leave. Down the avenue, shovels rise and fall with tide with it. Men work in lines, cutting snow into blocks, tossing it aside, widening paths, clearing doors, opening shop fronts. Some are city labourers. Some are hired by businesses. Some are residents who woke to discover that waiting is also a form of freezing. Their shoulders shine with dampness. Their hats are rimmed with melting snow. Steam rises from their backs when they pause near doorways. A man wipes his forehead with a sleeve, then looks at the sky as if filing a complaint. The sky of the snow replied it. A cart has been freed near the corner, though its wheels remain half buried. 2 horses stand harnessed before it, shaggy with frost and impatience. Their tails twitch. Their hooves stamp into dirty snow packed with ash for traction. The driver speaks to them quietly, one hand resting on the nearer animal's neck. The horse's coat is warm beneath his glove, and vapour curls from its nostrils. Animals, machines, and people all look tired together. The mainstream fact of the day surrounds you in every direction. After the Great Blizzard of 1888, New York had to clear enormous drifts by hand, shovel, cart, and horse labour. Streets, rail lines, ferries, markets, offices, and homes reopened unevenly. The recovery took days in many places, and it exposed how much the city depended on surface transport. The snow did not disappear because the storm ended. It had to be moved. That simple truth is everywhere. A group of workers is attacking a drift outside a dry goods stores. The drift reaches nearly to the sign above the entrance. The store owner stands nearby with his arms folded, offering advice nobody requested. One worker sits, leans on his shovel, and asks whether advice weighs less than snow. The owner retreats indoors to inspect something urgent. The workers continue grinning without wasting energy on laughter. Nearby, a woman clears her own steps with a broom, because no shovel's available. She sweeps, chops, kicks, and mutters in a steady rhythm. Her sleeves are rolled above the wrist despite the cold. A child beside her carries loosened snow away in a tin pan. Each load is tiny. Each load matters. You walk carefully along the trench, keeping one hand near the snow wall for balance. The surface underfoot changes without warning. Packed snow becomes ice. Ice becomes slush. Slush becomes a hidden rut waiting to embarrass. A man ahead slips, windmills both arms, recovers, and pretends this was a planned exercise. Nobody contradicts him. Mercy is one of the morning's better civic services. At the crossing, workers have cut steps into a drift so pedestrians can climb over. The steps are uneven, slick, and already worn by boots. You climb them slowly, feeling the snow wall brush against your coat. At the top, the city opens briefly before you. Rooftops sag under white weight. Chimneys smoke in ragged streams. Elevated to stand dark and stern above the buried avenue. Their ironwork is crusted with ice, but gangs are working along parts of the line. Tiny figures move high above the street, clearing switches and rails with tools that glint faintly. They look like watchmakers repairing a bridge. Below, men scrape streetcar tracks from under frozen layers. They strike iron, lose it, strike again, and cheer when a rail shows through. A rail exposed by a shovel can inspire surprising emotion. People gather to watch him, not because it is thrilling, exactly because a visible rail means the city might move again. A man in a bowler hat says service will resume by evening. Another asks whether he is employed by optimism. The bowler hat has no answer. You continue toward a wider avenue, where the digging has become organised. Teams work under foremen who shout instructions through cupped hands. Snow is shoveled into carts, sledges, empty crates, and sometimes simply onto higher banks. Boys carry messages between crews. Shopkeepers bring out coffee where they can. One bakery has opened its door fully, and the scent of hot bread moves into the cold like a blessing with steam. A line forms at once. People stand patiently, baskets in hand, faces raw from wind. You buy a small loaf with coins warmed in your glove. It is dense, dark, and still faintly warm through the city. The heat in your palm feels astonishingly intimate. Bread has become proof that systems can restart. You tuck it inside your coat. The loaf warms your ribs as you walk. That is not poetic. It is practical and wonderful. Near the bakery, a cluster of men tries to free a buried newsstand. Only the roof and one side remain visible. They shovel around it, and bundles of old papers appear, damp but readable near their centres. A boy seizes one and begins shouting headlines from 2 days ago with tremendous conviction. The crowd laughs. He bows and offers the outdated news at a discount. Someone buys a copy for the pleasure of mocking time. The quirky tidbit belongs to the snow business already forming around the city. Men with shovels, carts, and strong backs begin hiring themselves out wherever doors are blocked. Prices vary with urgency, drift height, and the customer's boots. One story spreads of a man charging extra to uncover a gentleman's front steps because the gentleman kept correcting his grammar. Whether true or not, it carries a certain civic justice. Language, like snow, can pile up unnecessarily. The city's recovery is not equal. That becomes clearer as you walk. A grand hotel sends several men into the street with proper shovels, heavy coats, and instructions. Their entrance becomes clear by steady labour. A poor tenement nearby has one broken shovel shared by many families. Residents use boards, pans, broom handles, and hands wrapped in cloth. Children carry snow away in buckets. An older woman sits near the doorway, watching little ones while adults dig. The doorway opens slowly, like a mouth taking its first careful breath. Inside, the hall looks dark and damp. The smell rising from it is close, human, and smoky. You pause with others and help carry 2 buckets to the growing heap near the curb. The handle cuts cold through your glove. The snow inside is heavier than expected. Urban snow always carries more than weather. A man thanks you with a nod, then returns to chopping a hard ridge at the threshold. No speech follows. The work is too large for ceremony. Historians still argue whether the blizzard's aftermath should be remembered mainly as a triumph of urban resilience, or as an indictment of urban neglect. There are reasons for both interpretations. The recovery shows enormous cooperation, endurance, and practical intelligence among ordinary people. It also reveals crowded housing, fragile infrastructure, dangerous streets, and deep differences in who receives help first. From the curb, watching a child drag snow in a cooking pot, the second argument feels difficult to ignore. Yet the child grins when the pot tips and spills perfectly onto the piles. Resilience and neglect often stand in the same doorway. A fire bell rings somewhere ahead, dull and muffled. People stop moving for a moment. The bell rings again, then again. Its sound travels strangely through the snow canyons, bouncing from walls and fading into the low sky. A murmur passes through the avenue. Fire is always feared in a crowded city, but winter complicates fear. Blocked streets slow engines, frozen hydrants resist use. Fallen wires and buried alarm boxes make warnings uncertain. You see a horse-drawn fire engine moving with painful slowness through a cleared path. Wheels groaning, horses straining, men shouting. Its brass fittings are dulled by wet snow. A child cheers, then falls silent when he sees the firefighters' faces. They are not performing. They're working against time and weather together. The engine passes, leaving churned slush and the smell of hot horse leather, smoke and iron. People widen the path behind it with renewed effort. A woman crosses herself. A man removes his hat briefly, though the cold punishes him at once. The city's dangers are not finished because the snowfall has eased. Sometimes ending is when work begins most sharply. You move toward the elevated railway station, where a crowd has gathered below the stairs. The stairway is partly cleared, but ice clings to each step. A railway employee stands at the base, explaining that service is limited and uncertain. Limited and uncertain are very elastic words. A commuter insists he must reach his office. The employee tells him many offices are enjoying solitude today. Another man asks whether trains are safe. The employee looks upward, then says the company would not run them if they were unsafe. This answer satisfies nobody, including the employee. Above, workers chip ice from a switch with hammers and bars. Each strike sends little shards falling through the ironwork. They glitter briefly before disappearing into grey snow below. The metallic rhythm carries down the avenue. Clink, pause, scrape, clink, pause, scrape. The elevated railway, symbol of speed and modern distance, now depends on cold hands hitting ice. You find that comforting in a strange way. Machines do not escape labour. They only change where labour stands. At a newspaper office, doors are open and men rush in and out carrying notes. Their boots leave black tracks across the threshold. Inside, presses may be waiting, delayed by missing reports, missing workers, or missing power. A man with ink on his cuffs argues with a messenger boy covered in snow. The boy insists he delivered exactly what he was given. The inked man says the handwriting looks like it was produced by a frightened spider. The boy replies that the spider was outdoors. A few nearby listeners laugh. Even news must thaw. A poster in the window announces storm reports when available. That last phrase is honest enough to be elegant. You think of all the stories forming across Manhattan. The stranded train, the buried steps, the shared parlour, the fallen wires, the warmed bricks, the dog on the drift, the bread from a cellar, the fire engine cutting slowly through snow. Some will enter newspapers, some will enter family memory, some will vanish after being told twice over weak tea. History is not only what survives, it is also what warms a room briefly and is gone. A cart loaded with snow passes slowly beside you. Its wheels squeal and its horse leans forward with patient misery. The snow is being hauled towards a place where it can be dumped, or melted, or merely become someone else's problem. Cities are very skilled at moving difficulty elsewhere. Men with hooks clear hanging ice from awnings. Shopkeepers scrape signs. A barber opens his door and sweeps snow from the threshold with a flourish. Someone asks whether he is offering storm discounts. He says anyone wanting a shave in this weather deserves full price. That seems fair. The barber pole is half coated with ice, its stripes dim beneath frozen glaze. As you turn back, the light begins to change. Not sunshine. Exactly. more a thinning of grey. The clouds lift enough to show brighter sky behind them. The snowbanks answer by shining faintly along their edges. Water begins dripping from a cornice. One drop lands on your glove, clear and sterling. Another falls from a signboard. Then another from a railing. The city has begun the long, messy conversation between snow and thaw. It will not be quick. Snowpack this deeply becomes stubborn. It turns to slush, freezes again, dirties, sinks, blocks drains, and soaks hems. The storm's departure will leave work for boots, brooms, carts, doctors, laundries, and plumbers. A disaster can end in the sky while continuing underfoot. You return to the boarding house carrying bread, cold cheeks, and the smell of streets in your coat. The front trench is wider now. The janitor has cleared the stoop to the railing on one side. He stands with his shovel planted, regarding his work like a general after an expensive victory. You tell him the avenue is opening. He says the avenue is welcome to open itself here next. His gloves are soaked. His eyebrows carry beads of thawing ice. You offer him a piece of the loaf from inside your coat. He takes it, surprised, then nods once. The bread steams faintly where it breaks. Inside, the hallway is wet with footprints and busy with returning people. A line of boots waits near the wall. Mittens hang on the banister. The air smells of damp wool, soup, coal smoke, lamp oil, and bread. You hand the loaf to the cook, who touches it and smiles before remembering not to. She cuts it into slices with careful fairness. Each slice releases a warm, sour fragrance. People gather without needing to be called. The city outside is digging out by streets, rails, doors, and tracks. Inside, recovery is measured in bread, dry socks as clearer paths, and the return of ordinary complaints. You take your slice near the parlour window and watch figures move along the trench. They look tired, small, and determined. The snowbanks tower around them, but the lines of passage are widening. Manhattan is not rushing yet. For once, it cannot, is learning the slow grammar of shovels. Cut, lift, toss, rest, breathe, begin again. You chew the bread slowly, feeling warmth return through your hands. Beyond the glass, the white city is marked now by human paths. You wake to dripping. Not roaring wind, not rattling glass, not the hard scrape of shovels. Just dripping, steady and small from roof edges, window ledges, awnings, pipes, and gutters. The sound gathers across the street in patient, uneven notes. Drop against tin, drop into slush. Drop from iron rail, drop onto stone som I kände med sonon to see ora. The room is still cold, yet the air has changed its intention. It no longer feels like a closed fist. A pale light enters through the upper window, clearer than it has been for days. The snow pressed against the lower pane has sunk slightly, leaving a wet crescent of glass exposed. Through it, you see a distorted stripe of the street below. Not much. Enough. A chimney stands where it belongs. A lamppost rises from dirty snow. A figure passes slowly, carrying a shovel over one shoulder, like a tool rather than a weapon. The world outside is returning by inches. You sit up beneath the blanket and listen. The house breathes differently too. Doors open without urgency. Footsteps move at a slower, less anxious pace. Somebody downstairs laughs at something ordinary, not because fear needs relief, but because morning has room for it. The grate holds only ash and a faint smell of spent coal. Your boots wait near the bed, dry enough to be forgiven. The towel along the sill is stiff with frozen damp at one edge and wet at the other. Even the room seems to underside between winter and thaw. You dress slowly, feeling the wool scratch your arms and the cold boards through your stockings. At the washstand, the water is liquid again. This feels like luxury. You splash your face and catch the sharp scent of iron from the basin. In the hallway, the boarding house wears the disorder of survival. Mittens hang from banisters. Boots stand in lines near walls. A broken shovel rests beside the stair, honoured by exhaustion. The wallpaper near the front door is streaked where snowy shoulders brushed it again and again. A house records weather and stains. Downstairs, the parlour is bright with curtains pulled wide. The windows look onto a city that no longer hidden, but certainly not tidy. Snowbanks remain along the street in great grey heaps. Their tops are crusted white, while their sides show layers of ash, dirt, straw and city life. Water runs in narrow channels beside them, black and shining. Every few moments, a chunk slides from a roof and lands below with a wet sigh. People look up before passing cornices now. Experiences education with colder fingers. The landlady stands by the front window, counting something in her head. Perhaps coal. Perhaps damage. Perhaps tenants who will soon remember their complaints. The young clerk is dressed for work, although his boots are still damp and his confidence is cautious. He says his office may open by noon. The older lodger says offices are like mushrooms after rain. Not always welcome, but difficult to prevent. The servant girl brings coffee, stronger than yesterday's, and the room accepts this as a moral improvement. You take a cup and stand where warmth from the grate reaches your knees. The coffee smells dark, bitter, and alive. Outside, Manhattan begins converting disaster into routine. A wagon moves slowly through the trench, wheels grinding against slush and buried stone. The horse pulls with lowered head, its harness dark and wet. A man walks beside it, guiding the wheels away from deeper ruts. At the corner, workers pry ice from a drain so meltwater can escape. Each strike of the bar rings clearly in the thinner air. The sound is practical, almost hopeful. Water finds the cleared channel and runs quickly, carrying soot and tiny bits of straw. The city is beginning to flow again. The mainstream fact that settles over this thaw is one of lasting change. The blizzard strengthened arguments for placing wires underground and improving transit systems less vulnerable to weather. It also helped shape later support for underground rapid transit in New York. People did not forget how quickly elevated lines, surface cars, ferries, and overhead wires had failed. A storm can become an engineer in memory. It draws diagrams in convenience. You step outside after breakfast, carrying no errand except the need to feel the changed air. The stoop is mostly clear now, though ice grips the shaded edges. You hold the railing, wet and freezing beneath your glove. The trench has widened into a rough passage shared by carts, pools and walkers, and men who still believe as shouting improves traction. Snowbanks tower beside the curb, but their authority is softened. Their surfaces glisten. Water drips from them in tiny silver threads. A child pokes one with a stick, then leaps back as a chunk collapses. The child laughs with the boldness of someone not responsible for laundry, and at the avenue, you see more of the city than you have in days. Shop signs emerge. Basement doors open. Cellar grates steam faintly. Men spread ashes over slick places, turning the white paths into grey workable roads. A woman lifts her skirt carefully and crosses on a plank laid over slush. The plank bends. She freezes. Two strangers offer hands from opposite sides, and she steps forward with excellent suspicion. Once across, she nods to both rescuers as though awarding medals privately. You smell thaw everywhere. Wet horse, damp wool, coal smoke, uncovered gutters, bread, mud, and cold stone. It is not a romantic smell. It is the smell of a city becoming usable again. Elevated trains remain irregular, but a car moves along the track in the distance. Its wheels produce a cautious metallic rumble. People stop and look up. The train passes slowly, dark against the pale sky, windows fogged with passengers. No one cheers. New Yorkers are careful about giving machinery too much emotional encouragement. Still, faces lift. A moving train is a kind of promise. Nearby, workers continue clearing wires from a side street. Broken strands lie coiled on snowbanks, black and stiff. A lineman climbs a pole with slow, deliberate movements, belt fastened, tools knocking against his side. He chips ice from an insulator and calls down to another man below. Their work looks dangerous and exact. Modern Sudum is being restrung by hand. A quirky tidbit travels along the sidewalk from a newspaper boy with a voice fully recovered. He claims a man has opened a little booth selling pieces of genuine blizzard snow in jars. The jars, he says, are guaranteed to melt into historic water. No embolicism leaves him entirely. Several people ask where the booth is. That is how cities work. Skepticism and curiosity share the same coat. The newspaper boy waves a damp paper and shouts a summary of damage, rescue, delay, and bravery. His headlines are louder than his facts, but nobody expects otherwise. Newspapers will turn the storm into numbers, scenes, lessons, and arguments. They will tell of deaths, stranded passengers, heroic workers, failed systems, blocked streets, and miraculous escapes. They will also miss much. They may not mention the servant girl winning buttons, the burnt continent of a bedsheet, the shared peppermint, or the exact smell of cabbage soup during fear. History always has pockets. Some are never turned out. You walk past the grocer, whose side entrance now opens fully. He stands at the threshold sweeping slush with grim repetition. His shelves look emptier. As shown before, but customers still enter. Beans remain. Candles remain. Eggs are still negotiations with the universe. He sees you and says milk may arrive later if the wagon can pass. His tone suggests milk has become a visiting dignitary. At the bakery, loaves cool by the window and the scent spills into the street. Steam fogs the glass from within. A line forms again, shorter, calmer. Hunger has not vanished, but panic has loosened. People speak of repairs, relatives, work, prices, and ruined shoes. Ordinary complaints return like sparrows. They are not noble, they are comforting. Near the tenement doorway, the broken shovel has been replaced by two better ones borrowed from a shop. The entrance is wider now. Children kick dirty snow into the gutter with unnecessary drama. A woman shakes a rug from an upstairs window, and dust falls onto a drift below. Someone protests. She says the snow may as well make itself useful. There is wisdom there. Historians still disagree about whether disasters produce lasting compassion within cities. Some evidence shows communities remember shared hardship and improve institutions. Other evidence shows old inequalities reappear quickly when danger passes. As you watch the cleared doorway, both futures seem possible. The street may remember. The street may forget. Perhaps memory needs more than feeling. It needs bricks, laws, tunnels, budgets, and people willing to remain inconvenient. The storm has ended its performance. The argument about what it meant is only beginning. You turn back toward the boarding house as the afternoon light softens. The sky opens in pale blue patches between racing clouds. Sun touches the tops of snowbanks, turning them briefly beautiful despite their dirty sides. Drips quicken from eaves. A man knocks icicles from a shop awning with a broom. They shatter on the ground like dropped glass. A horse shakes its mane, sending bright droplets into the air. The city is still wounded, but it is moving, slowly, awkwardly, loudly into places, quietly in others. That is often how recovery looks. No grand curtain rises. People sweep thresholds. They mend gloves. They count coal. They visit neighbours. They open doors. Inside the house, the parlour has been partly restored to its formal arrangement. Chairs have returned toward their expected places, though not perfectly. The shared blanket remains folded over the sofa, as if keeping its own counsel. The card buttons have been returned, except perhaps for one or two carried off as private trophies. The older lodger dozes near the window with a newspaper on his lap. The young woman darns a stocking by daylight and makes a face at the quality of earlier work. Your earlier work, probably... The servant girl carries a lamp through the room, though it is not yet evening. Habit prepares before need asks. You climb to your room and stand beside the window. More glass is visible now. The snowbank outside has sunk below the sill in places, leaving wet streaks and little tunnels where warm air escaped. A droplet slides down the pane, catching light as it goes. Another follows. Then another. The room smells of drying wool, cold ash, faint soap, and fresh bread from the slice saved in your pocket. You place it on the table beside the humbled biscuit. The contrast is moving in a very carbohydrate way. You sit on the bed and let the quiet settle around you. Not the thick silence of buried streets, not the tense listening of broken wires. This quiet is looser, filled with dripping distant wheels, a train rumble, and voices from the trench below. The storm has left marks everywhere, yet the room no longer feels sealed. It feels like a room again, a tired one, a grateful one. You loosen your boots and feel warmth spread through your feet. Outside, Manhattan exhales in slush and smoke. The great white walls are lowering. The windows are returning to sight. The city has learned, at least for a little while, that progress can be stopped by weather, and kindness can travel without wires. You feel the blanket beneath your hand, rough and familiar. Evening moves closer with gentle steps. Now the story softens, and the street grows dim. The snowbanks lose their sharp edges as twilight settles over Manhattan. Gas lamps appear one by one, glowing through damp air instead of flying snow. Their light rests on puddles, rails, steps, and thawing roofs. You lie back and listen to water falling from the eaves in slow, irregular beads. Each drop seems to carry away a little fear, a little cold, a little noise from the storm. The house settles around you with ordinary sounds returning. A cup is washed downstairs. A door closes softly. A chair leg moves across a floor. Somewhere, someone laughs in a low voice and then remembers to be quiet. You breathe in the warm mixed scent of wool, bread, lamp oil, and coal ash. The city outside is still hard, still crowded, and still unfair in many familiar ways. Yet tonight it feels gentler at the edges. Snow remains piled along the curbs, but it's no longer climbing. Windows shine above it, steps emerge from it, footprints cross it. Tomorrow, people will argue about costs, reforms, Marseilles, and who should have acted sooner. They will be right to argue. But for now, you can let the arguments drift away. You're only here, in this narrow room, beneath a heavy blanket, with thawing Manhattan breathing beyond the glass. The last light fades slowly. The lamp flame bends once, then steadies. You follow the sound of dripping water until it becomes almost like a lullaby. Drop by drop, the storm becomes memory. Street by street, the city returns. Breath by breath, your body releases its watchfulness. Sleep comes quietly, like snow that has finally learned to fall without wind.